Okay, we are
Hello.
streaming.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, this is Denise.
Hi, Denise.
How you doing, Dr. Longwood?
Real fine.
Okay. I'll get better after I've had that second cup of coffee. Hi, Patrick.
How are you? I
Okay.
think we're all here now.
Okay.
Hi,
Morning,
Denise.
Morning,
Hello,
I'm
everybody.
first.
morning, Raji.
Hello.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Raji, congratulations.
Congratulations, Raji.
Yay.
Thank you. I
So-
made it.
So,
Hey, that's a long road to go.
so
It
in starting out your next 4 years of service, would you consider leading the pledge this morning?
Oh, sure.
Okay,
Sure.
great.
Do we have a new board member?
Negative.
Oh,
We have Raji is a renewed board member.
okay.
Most of the guests right now.
Well, we're glad for that, but I thought they were talking about another board member coming on.
We are, and they've kept promising us that one's on its way, but yet to materialize. I know, not to get too far into detail, but the Office of Chief Counsel has been vetting candidates, but it's up to the governor to actually make that call.
Okay.
And
He's got a few distractions to deal with right now, I guess.
Just a little. Just a-
and Christy has a new boss over in the governor's office, I'm told.
Yeah, there's a new appointment secretary, younger guy, but
You mean Catherine's not there anymore?
I don't know if Catherine's not there anymore, but they just brought somebody else on as the new appointment secretary. I don't know if she's still working in a different capacity.
Oh, okay.
Good morning, everyone. This is Tam.
Good
Hey,
morning,
Tam, how are you?
Morning, Pam.
And since we're talking appointments, I assume we're not on air yet. Let me take this opportunity to let you know that my term is expiring on January 15th. And I have notified the governor's office that I am not seeking another term. So this might be my last opportunity to appear in front of you. It's been a real honor and privilege. And I have just so much enjoyed your board over the years, from Pamela to now Patrick. You guys are amazing.
Sorry to see you
Oh
go.
my goodness.
Well, Tam, thank you very much for your service all these many years. I hate to think how many years we've known each other.
I think you still beat me, Carl,
Yeah.
in terms of the number of years of service.
Yeah, but certainly, we certainly appreciate your role in front of this board and in your job downtown. I'm sure that you're going to do a lot more photography and traveling.
Well, we'll see. It all depends a lot on how things roll out with COVID, I guess.
Well, Tam, I'm telling you, since I've been on the board, you've been very inspirational for me and all the things that you've done. So not having your presence on the board, you've been the representative. We're expecting to see you every meeting, and you're not going to be there anymore. So really appreciate what you've done and the support you've given me during my tenure on this board. Thank you so much.
You're still welcome to come to our meetings, though, Tam. Door's always open.
Sorry about that. I got disconnected.
So just a reminder, we are live streaming this on YouTube today.
Oh,
No
I always wanted to
longer-
be like YouTube famous, so today could be my day.
Here we go.
We're live streaming on YouTube.
We are, instead of the Cal EPA webcast page, we are now have moved it to YouTube.
Wonderful.
Well, during this pandemic, right? Because when we're back in the office one of these days, you know, the existing setup where we still need to do some setting.
Yeah, no, the YouTube is actually a huge advance in terms of the quality of the digital signal that goes out to the public. And in addition, if you're at the Cal EPA website, the old one at the, I think it was Cal Recycle kind of runs that website. You can't rewind it. You can pause it and kind of play it forward, but full functionality on YouTube. So, you know, if there's a member of the public that, you know, all of a sudden joins our feed and says, wait a second, I missed the first 15 minutes, they can rewind it and get the whole entirety of the board's broadcast. And it can also be seen at a later date. And we also avoid the kind of, you know, cumbersome putting stuff on DVDs and mailing it out. So this is a really, really big step forward. And it's much appreciation to the IT folks to get that functionality up and running.
It's a hugely improved audio feed.
The only thing that's happened during COVID that is worthwhile is the improvement in IT services.
Zesty is the mother of invention. It's kind of the
Oh, yeah.
catchphrase.
So we've got,
If I may check with the court reporter, make sure all is well with you.
Good morning. I am here and ready to go.
Terrific.
and we're ready to start if everybody else is.
Let me start on the recording. Very good. So we're on YouTube and recording this. I'm free
Okay.
to start.
Good morning. Welcome to the 572nd board meeting of the California Regional Water Quality Control Board, Central Valley Region. I am Carl Longley, Chair of the Central Valley Water Board, and I'll introduce the other board members in just a minute. This is the fourth meeting that we'll be conducting during the COVID-19 emergency. In order to comply with public gathering limitations and physical distancing requirements, and as authorized by the governor's executive orders, there is no physical meeting room. For people who only want to listen or watch the meeting, the board's customary webcast is available. And I was just being told that we're also on YouTube. How would one find us on YouTube?
Dr. Longley, go to video.calepa.ca.gov.
And I'll give it to you. Good, thank you. In addition, we're receiving presentations and public comment through a Zoom meeting platform. If you intend to comment or present or think you might be interested in commenting, you should already be in the Zoom meeting room using the meeting ID provided on the board's website. Also, you can use the password you received from our staff. If you have not already received a password, you can email us now at agenda5@waterboards.ca.gov. I'll spell that out. agenda5@waterboards.ca.gov. That email address that I just given you, you should include speaker comment in the subject line so that we can follow up with you. For those in the Zoom meeting, you'll be on mute and your camera turned off until it is your turn to speak. Our meeting host, Gene Coughlin from our IT team, will then unmute you and ask you to turn on your camera if you have one. When you have finished speaking and the board members have completed asking questions, you will be placed on mute and your camera will be turned off. We appreciate your patience and understanding during this extraordinary time. I'll now introduce the other board members as follows. Carmen Ramirez of Atwater, Denise Cadera of Allensworth, Raji Brar of Bakersfield, Mark Bradford of Sacramento, and I'm Carl Longley of Fresno. State Board Member Tam Dudek is participating in this meeting and will give an update to the board a little later. I'll now introduce the executive officer who will introduce his staff.
Good morning, Dr. Longley, members of the board. My name is Patrick Palupa, Executive Officer of the Central Valley Water Board. Welcome to our virtual meeting. As I mentioned, as Bob mentioned, we are streaming on YouTube. An advancement in terms of what the digital signal is for this platform, and also gives a little bit more ability for folks to come in and interact and see what we've been up to if they're not able to tune in real time. So again, a really big advancement in kind of making sure that the board's decisions are made in the most transparent manner possible. On the virtual meeting today, we have our assistant executive officers starting in the Reading office. We have Assistant Executive Officer Clint Snyder. From the Sacramento Rancho Cordova office, we have Adam Lapitz and JJ Baum. And in the Fresno office, we have Clay Rogers. We also have Kelly Garver, who's our administrative officer, and attorneys from the Office of Chief Counsel, David Lancaster, Jessica Yar, and Bailey Toft Dupuis. We also have a number of staff participating both in the Zoom call and watching on the YouTube channel. So, welcome everybody to our digital meeting, and back to you, Carl.
Thank you very much, Patrick. We'll move now to agenda item. Whoops, I got ahead of myself. Got way ahead of myself. Roger, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Of course. Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to agenda item 2. Are there any board member communications? Carmen?
I audited, I guess, the WQCC meeting back in October. I was having connection issues, so I was sort of in and out. That was it for me.
Yes, Dr. Longley, I also attended or participated in the annual WQCC and participated in a racial equity session actually the following day.
Thank you. Any other activities?
Hi, Dr. Longley. I'd like to report that I am very honored to be reappointed by the governor to serve on the water board, and looking forward to 4 more years with you all, and looking forward to working on helping to keep the water quality of our water in the state safe.
Well, we appreciate, Roger, we appreciate your contributions, and not only been appointed, you've been sworn in, and you're all the way there. So congratulations on starting out another 4 years.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
thanks for your service.
Yeah, it was I have to say it was quite unique to be sworn in via Zoom. So that's something new. Someday I get to share that story with people who won't understand what it is to live through a pandemic. So
Yeah, well, I'm afraid that this is going to become more commonplace as time goes on. We get used to it over a year. Any further comments by board members? Okay, on the 22nd of October, I attended a CV Salts committee, CV Salts XCOM meeting, and of course, all of these meetings that I'm talking about are via Zoom. On the 27th, 28th of October, I was also participated in the WQCC, and I'm a little bit shocked to learn of the difficulties you folks are having. I think that we need to make sure that next WQCC that does not occur. That there is a check-in beforehand or something like that, so people can determine their ability to participate, as we have for our meetings. On the 2nd of November and the 7th of December, I participated in a board chairs meeting. 13th of November, I provided a presentation to an audience put together by the Lyles College of Engineering on water quality, Central Valley. Once again, this was a Zoom meeting. Zoom has become our life. So are there any further comments? Then we appreciate very much if Tam Dudick could give us an update on state board activities.
Good morning. It's always good to see all of you. Since this is the last meeting of the year, as always, let me take this opportunity to thank you all for your service, not only through this year, a very difficult and challenging year for all of us, but throughout your many years of service on the Regional Water Board. Region 5 is the largest region we have, and the myriad of issues you cover, from hydraulic fracking to forestry issues, to wildfires, to ag runoff, to environmental justice, to homeless, and that's just to name a few. I'm always amazed at the commitment and dedication and talent of your staff, as well as your board's leadership in tackling all these issues and balancing all the difficult factors that involve into good policy and good regulatory decision-making. So thank you so much for your continued service. Let me briefly report a note of a celebration at the State Water Board. After almost 20 years, we adopted the toxicity provisions at our last board meeting. And it was an extensive effort involving a lot of collaboration with stakeholders, with regional board staff. And so we look forward to the implementation of that very important set of provisions. We are, as you may know by now, also considering a general order for discharges from wineries, and that has been moved. It was originally scheduled for next week's board meeting, but that has moved to the first board meeting in January in order to provide stakeholders more opportunity to review the changes that staff is proposing. And then the only other thing that I'll sort of tee up for your attention right now is, after many years, the State Water Board is in the process of revising our construction stormwater permit. A staff draft has been released, and staff is conducting some workshops with stakeholders. I believe there will be a formal State Water Board workshop in March, hearing in April, and potential consideration later on in the year. But it is going to be, I think, a tremendous effort. I think we're all sensitive to the current economic climate, and yet. We still have to take actions that are necessary to protect public health, water quality, fulfill our missions. And so trying to, again, find that delicate balance. And the staff has proposed some new changes based on many years of experience in implementing the previous construction stormwater permit. So we look forward to having that robust discussion with stakeholders, getting the input in, and making the appropriate revisions in moving forward in a practical but hopefully effective manner. So I'll tee you up on that particular issue, which I think will be of tremendous significance in 2021 for us on the regulatory forefront. So I will end there.
Thank you very much. Any questions for?
I don't have a question, but I'll say that I want to return that same gratitude to you and to staff at the state board. You always keep us updated. You're accessible, and I'm really grateful to work with you. And I wish you also a great holiday, and thank you again, and state board staff for all the work you do to support us.
Tam has been focused on regional boards ever since she's been a state board member, and I remember working with her when she was really attempting to working with regional board chairs, attempting to increase communication and really make the regional boards part of the water board's system, at least feel like they're part of it. So I add my thanks to that.
You are.
Moving on to agenda item 4, the public forum. We have a blue card from Kim Burns representing E&J Gallo Winery. Patrick, are you going to be talking about wineries during your report?
I am not. There's a mention of it in the executive officer's report, but I don't know what the public commenter is.
Okay, we'll move to Kim Burns then. Kim, are you online with us?
My request for commenting was tentative pending other comments from the public. So no comment from me.
No comment. Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on then to agenda item 5, the executive officer's report. Patrick will discuss the board's ongoing response to COVID-19 and provides updates on current budget situation.
Yeah, and I think the main update is that we are consistent with state policy directives. We're switching back into an even more restrictive place in terms of where we are in terms of operating our offices across the state. It's not a huge shift in posture because we've been really running relative skeleton crew operations out of all the offices to really ensure the safety of our staff and frankly, the safety of anybody who interacts with the regional boards. But that's even pulled back a little bit more where we're really just focusing on essential work, and everybody who can work from home is working from home at this point. We have very few staff in the office. There are some staff who come by to check out equipment, to do inspections and compliance inspections. Many of those inspections, if they can be pushed back a month, we're pushing them back a month. Compliance inspections and inspections for urgent water quality issues that need to be tracked down and dealt with are still being done. But we are maintaining social distance protocols. So, probably taking out a few more trucks on some of the inspections than we usually would be, because we're not having staff all pile into one vehicle where everybody's taking separate vehicles, doing measures like that to ensure that we are protecting our staff and still maintaining our core functionality as we go through this. I would also add that, in addition to the folks that we have committed to contact tracing, the folks that we have committed to the current furlough or personal leave program that we're under, we have been hiring a bit, but it also looks like we're going to be mission tasked by the California Office of Emergency Services to continue to provide a little bit more support for debris management in the wake of the epic fires that we've had this past year. And just so for your information, I know I've discussed this before, we have a cohort of our staff that is trained up in hazardous materials, and the Office of Emergency Services, consistent with state law, can what's called mission task organizations throughout the state functionality to work on the cleanup of debris when there's an emergency declaration. So it really involves staff going around and working with landowners who've seen their house burned down. How do we clean this up so it doesn't present a threat to water quality? So we have a number of staff that will be recruited into that effort. And it's a tough mission. It kind of erodes a little bit at what we are doing here in the office. But that said, it's still a water quality protection function. So work is still getting done. Good work is still getting done to protect the environment by our staff. It just requires some adjustments to what our work plan goals are as we delegate staff to participate in those efforts. And that's the main COVID-19 update from the region. I will say just continue to everybody wear masks and practice physical distancing. Our staff has been very, very good about following that guidance and providing a good example for each other and for the public, and really taking these things seriously. With respect to the other issues in the executive officer's report, I'll point out just a main thing. In December, we typically bring program priorities to the board for discussion. I shared the document with you guys. It's less involved than it has been in the past. I usually give a full presentation on that. And it's less involved to a certain degree because we are going to be launching the survey as part of the strategic planning effort that asks folks to comment on what the board's priorities should be for the next 5 to 7 years. A couple delays in getting that survey done just because we had to get a contract in place to get the survey instrument, and then right now it's all finalized, the English version, but we want to make sure that we release the Spanish version at the same time. And so we're still waiting on some translation services to finalize their draft of that. But hopefully within the next week or so, we will be able to hit the streets with a survey instrument that will go out very broadly to a wide swath of stakeholders. And we'll be able to help folks navigate through the survey in Spanish and English, and whatever assistance they may have, providing input to the board on what the strategic goals and priorities should be for the next 5 to 7 years. I regret that I wasn't able to kind of share that with you today, but I really want to get that Spanish version out at the same time so that everybody has the equal amount of time to comment on what our strategic vision should be. But again, should be within the next week or so that we'll get that out there. And if you'd like, if any of the board members would like a preview version of that, I can certainly share that with you. As the results come back, they'll probably be out there for about 30, 40 days. When the results come back, we'll be able to talk about that with you in February. So those are the main points for the executive officer report. If you have any other questions, I'm more than happy to answer them now.
Thank you, Patrick. I'd certainly like to see a copy of that. Will there be a discussion then or presentation on that at the February meeting, or would you anticipate later in the spring?
We should have the data back to have at least a preliminary presentation, hopefully it all wrapped up by then, of what the survey results tell us about what our stakeholders, how our stakeholders view our strategic goals for the next 5 to 7 years again.
And I might alert board members that the February meeting should be a much fuller meeting as far as the agenda is concerned. It's going to be an interesting, maybe more than one day. Very good. Any questions from board members?
This is Carmen. As to the survey, I'm really glad that this is going out. The way that we function, and there's, some big things that, are hard. You can't really move those around, but to the extent that we can, I'm interested to know what, the public that we serve see as our function, and whether what we think is important matches up with what they think. And maybe shed insight. So I'm really glad that we're taking this step. And I know it's a lot of work, but I'm really grateful and I look forward to a report on it.
Yeah, and I will say, much gratitude from me to the folks who volunteered for the strategic planning committee. We've got a number of staff that are working on that. Got some great edits to the draft. I know I think I shared a preview copy with you, Carmen. I'll get it to other board members too if they want to kind of peruse that before it goes public, or it may go public very soon, so you can kind of take a look at the finalized version. But a lot of gratitude to the folks who are working on the strategic planning committee, coming up with that survey instrument to really get at the root of what people think of us. And to be honest, one of the things that I've noticed, being here a little over 2 years, 2.5 years, time's flying, is that the priorities for the board and the way it's structured under the portfolio management weren't changing a lot from year to year. So you really need that kind of more long-term assessment if you really want to turn the kind of big ship that this government agency is. Year over year, you're not going to see a lot of changes. But if you change, the ultimate guidepost, then you have the opportunity to say, well, we can slowly shift some resources in that direction. We can pivot here. Maybe we can request, from the legislature to do something a little differently, or from the state board to do something a little differently, revise a policy or do something of that nature. That is not something that is easy to do year over year. And that's kind of why you see the priorities. They don't change too much year over year. So really, we're trying to get a little bit more big picture thinking with the strategic plan that could enable us to shift if our stakeholders really want, significant shifts in what we do. And the answer doesn't have to be, hey, that's out of our jurisdiction, or hey, that's not something we can handle. It can instead be, that's something that is currently out of our jurisdiction, but we're going to work on it for the next, a long-term plan to make sure that we can get that to happen. So, again, it's something that I hope to share with you in February about what our stakeholders' viewpoints are.
Thanks, Patrick. And yeah, I'm excited to see what that generates in terms of comments, obviously, and would be interested in seeing the survey. I'm kind of curious how you developed a list of stakeholders. I'm sure there's a lot of obvious candidates to get a copy of the survey, but what was that process like?
So we discussed it briefly at the last board meeting, and it involved when you had the presentation from the strategic planning committee, they went to all the program managers and said, who do you interact with? Who do you interact with as a UST program manager? Who do you interact with as a SWAMP program manager? And so all the program managers gave some feedback. Clint has some really stellar administrative staff in the Reading office who essentially took that list and tried to pull out from online resources for, as many emails as they could get. We're going to merge that list of emails with all the folks who have signed up for our Lyris lists, which is a kind of huge cohort of people, not just the agenda one, but some of the permitting ones, some of the ones having to do with TMDLs, and just kind of blast it out there, put it front and center on the webpage, talk about it on Twitter, do things like that to really try and generate some interest. We're even, Carmen, looking at to see if we can get some Facebook targeted advertisement to kind of even blast it out there a little bit more to see how many responses we can get and get some meaningful responses from a cross spectrum of industry and stakeholder representatives.
And Patrick, I like the question that was asked by Mark, board member. One of the things that I've seen recently is there is a Spanish language television morning program that has recently reached out to try to get more information on work that we do with the college, but they're really hungry for content that affects people in the Central Valley. So I'm going to pass that contact on. We can talk offline, but I really see this as big potential. And so I'm glad that Mark reminded me about that contact that came up.
Absolutely. And there's certainly representatives from executive management that would be more than happy to speak on those. But there's also, and you may not have seen them because they don't necessarily present in front of the board, we've got an amazing cohort of particularly younger engineers, scientists, geologists some of which who are native Spanish speakers that are really engaging both on a personal level and a professional level with their communities, and bringing additional awareness as to what we do, the importance of water. And so we could also get some of those voices into the mix as well. I'd be more than happy to kind of give them the time and the latitude to have those conversations on state time, because I think it's part of our core mission, at least as far as I view it.
Any further comments? Thank you very much. We'll move on then to agenda item 6. I have not received a copy of the minutes. At least I'm not aware of receiving a copy of the minutes. Have they been sent out?
They have been. They are now. In addition, they're up on the website as well. I don't know if you want to give a few minutes to peruse those, or we could simply defer it to a later board meeting for consideration there.
Let's do it at the next board meeting.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Agenda item 7 is review of the Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos control program.
Hey, Carl.
Yes.
I'm not certain, it's unclear to me, but it looks like we have a blue card for the yield report item from Miss Kim Burns. I don't know if
we talked to Kim earlier.
Okay.
When we were I questioned her because on the sheet that I have here, it shows that she's on both a public forum and the EO report. So unless if Kim wants to testify further, she can come on now. But it was my understanding that she had no comments. She was simply listening in.
No comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 7. This time the board will hear an update on the Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos control program.
My apologies. I do have some awards to give out before the executive officer report is closed.
Okay, go ahead.
I am guilty this go around for not reaching that unmute button quick enough. I think that has to happen at least once per meeting.
It does.
So we've got a number of Superior Accomplishment Awards and a Sustained Superior Accomplishment Award as well. I'm going to start with a Superior Accomplishment Award, a team award to folks in the confined animal unit for Charles Cardenas and Elizabeth Reese. And if they're not in the Zoom meeting, I certainly hope that they are participating via the YouTube channel. They're both invited to kind of hear the good words to say about them. And this has to do with the bovine reporting tool that they developed. In July 2018, staff began working on a contract with Merced County to develop a bovine reporting tool for use in submitting annual reports required by the general order for the confined bovine feeding operations. That's the order the board adopted in 2017. The first annual reports were due to the Central Valley Water Board in July of this past year. After working on the contract for 18 months, we were informed by Merced County at the beginning of January of 2020 that they would be unable to do the work and the contract was canceled. Without standardized forms for completing and submitting annual reports for the newly regulated bovine operations, there was a high likelihood that we would not receive many of the required reports, and the reports we did receive would be substantially incomplete. Charles volunteered to develop reporting forms that could be hosted on a website and submitted to us electronically, thus improving both the likelihood of compliance and the quality of the reports that we received. Charles, with the assistance of Elizabeth Reese, the Confined Animal Unit's scientific aide, developed standalone Excel spreadsheets for auction yards and for bovine operations without cropland, allowing them to enter animal numbers and other regulated data and generate electronic annual reports for submittal. For bovine operations with cropland regulated under the Bovine General Order, Charles developed a separate Excel spreadsheet that converted herd size information into manure generation figures while Elizabeth created a PDF document to guide bovine operators through the use of the existing Merced County annual reporting tool for dairies and for their bovine cropland information. Working really hard, and despite the COVID-19 work from home disruption starting in mid-March of 2020, Charles and Elizabeth were able to have all the tools ready for release to industry on 14 April 2020. Subsequent to that date, Charles has been fielding questions from users as a Central Valley Water Board contact for questions regarding the bovine reporting tool. Charles and Elizabeth have done an outstanding job and are very deserving of this reward. And I just want to kind of highlight this because this is the type of action by board staff that represents both a lot of innovation and initiative, and really shows how when we adopt a program, we don't intend to adopt a program or to adopt a general order and leave a discharger out in the cold without a good understanding of how to comply with that order. In this case, we tried to make sure that there were reporting tools available so that bovine facilities could easily report the information that they were generating to the regional board. We'd get meaningful information back and really have a good handle on what the regulatory standards need to be for these facilities. It also highlights the extent to which we rely upon scientific aids for doing a lot of our core work. They're really, really a vital part of our organization, and many of them go on to become staff members and take long and extended careers at the Water Board and other regulatory agencies here in Sacramento and elsewhere in the state. So much thanks to both Charles and Elizabeth, and well deserving of this reward.
And Patrick, can I just say that I noticed the timing when they finished it in April of 2020. And that was right when the pandemic stuff was happening. It would have been such an easy time to let something like that go and just say, look, administratively, it's too hard, you know, coordinating with all these agencies that are shutting down and have different priorities is too hard. But to have pushed through is a big achievement. And then also having now this electronic reporting tool, which now becomes more important, right? And more valuable because of the limit of interaction. I think we all expected this to have value, but now it has tremendous value because of what's happened. So, you know, Merced County, that's where I live. It's certainly something that's been on the radar for me. So I was glad to see that this was going to be awarded today. So if Elizabeth and I just forgot Charles's name. If you're on there, I'm really grateful and thank you. And you know, I'm glad that we have people like you, you know, putting in the work.
All right. And I'll go on to present. This is another group award. The group award is going to what has been called the CV Salts Implementation Red Team. And again, I want to kind of thank the team here for working on this, and also want to thank Ann Walters and Walt Plakta for helping facilitate this team's work. When the board adopts a basin plan amendment like the CV Salts Basin Plan Amendment package, there are dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of additional minute issues that have to be worked out, and that will have tremendous consequences in terms of what permits will look like, how implementation will go for years to come. And this red team is the team of permitting experts that really dug into this Basin Plan Amendment package and tried to figure out how to implement this in a manner that would be effective in reaching the board's goals, and also translate to permit terms that were both enforceable and easily understood by the dischargers who will be regulated under this program. So without further ado, I want to recognize Denise Soria, Water Resource Control Engineer in the Fresno office, Joey Sisk, a Water Resource Control Engineer also in the Fresno office, Kristen Gomes, Water Resource Control Engineer in the Fresno office, Armando Martinez, a Water Resource Control Engineer in the Rancho Cordova office, and Guy Childs, an engineering geologist in the Rancho Cordova office, all of whom work in different programs implementing different facets of the CV Salts program. Earlier this year, Basin Plan amendments became effective for a region-wide salt and nitrate control program. which provides a framework for the board to regulate salt and nitrate while also ensuring that groundwater users whose wells are impacted with nitrates are provided safe drinking water. Because of the broad application of these new regulations across the board's programs, the CV Salt's Red Team was formed to assist with program implementation. Denise, Joey, Kristen, Armando, and Guy have been invaluable members of the Red Team, taking on these new roles on top of their regular duties. CV Salt staff rely on the program-specific expertise each of these members bring to the salt and nitrate control program. They have helped CV Salt staff develop a variety of protocols, templates, and procedures to help ensure consistency and efficiency across the agency. These Red Team members have also helped verify and edit huge data sets of permittee information to assist with the creation of a new CV Salts database. Each of the team members have taken on these additional tasks with a positive attitude and a great attention to detail. Following the mail out of the first notice to comply letters for the nitrate control program this past May, the team members followed up on numerous phone calls and emails from discharter community, providing timely responses to both internal and external customers. Denise, Joey, Kristen, Armando, and Guy are hardworking and valued members of the CV Salts Red Team and have been key to helping CV Salts program meet its milestones and objectives. As the salt and nitrate control program ramps up over the next year, the role of the Red Team will be even more critical to the success of the program. We are fortunate to have them working at the Central Valley Water Board, and they are well deserving of this award. So much thanks go out to all the members that are receiving this award here today.
Does that finish your presentations?
One more award.
One more, okay.
All right, and this is a this is a big award. This is the Sustained Superior Accomplishment Award. My executive team here really has gone the extra mile, both in terms of what they've done under the COVID-19 protocols and what they do on a day-to-day basis. I want to recognize all of them, you know, from Clay, JJ, Adam, Carrie, and the work that they do day in and day out, going the extra mile, working weekends when called for and late hours to make sure that this board has all the information it needs to make decisions that are fully protective of water quality. But today I want to especially recognize one member of the executive team who is incredibly deserving of this reward, Clint Snyder. Clint Snyder, Assistant Executive Officer, was nominated for this award by his staff, not just because of what he does for the Reading office, but also what he has done to implement the portfolio management process across all of the offices. For those of you who are new board members that came to this board relatively recently, we didn't used to operate as a combined unit. There used to be what used to be called satellite offices in Reading and Fresno that largely did their own thing, that could adopt permits that looked a lot different from what we were adopting here in Rancho Cordova. It is a monumental effort to really align the work of all three offices and to effectively come up with a regulatory program that ties those offices together to regulate what's about half of the state of California, most of the state's agricultural sector, many of the state's forests, many of the state's disadvantaged communities. And this was done largely because of Clint's efforts in this area. The Central Valley Water Board, it really benefited from Clint's attention to these inter-office challenges and his identification of a need to pull the region together in a way that would assure a more efficient use of resource and a better alignment of priorities. He introduced the portfolio management concept to the Central Valley Water Board in 2013. Portfolio management provides a framework to guide program managers in establishing goals and targets, identifying priorities, obstacles, and needs, and accounting for those resources uses across the entire region. Through implementation of portfolio management, program managers develop annual work plans that identify targets, priorities, and obstacles. The process of developing these annual work plans, a process that includes receiving input from the board and the board's executive management, encourages strategic thinking rather than reactionary responses. This process not only helps ensure that staff resources are allocated in the most efficient manner, but it also helps ensure that the board's allocation of resources and priority setting decisions are transparent, resulting in a higher degree of accountability. The portfolio management framework ultimately guarantees that even during the inevitable crises that our region face, it will never again be 3 sub-regions with little effective coordination. The effort to turn such a large organization into a 3 offices, 1 region model was a monumental undertaking. Obstacles in the form of "we've always done it this way" attitudes, to confusion regarding resource allocations, to anti-change sentiments were met with patience and perseverance. Clint's relentless focus on positive outcomes and the long-term benefits of the process resulted in a slow but steady buy-in that has paid incredible dividends for the region's efficiency and accountability. Beyond his contributions to the development and implementation of the portfolio management, Clint has become a leader in numerous other areas. For example, when unprecedented wildfires burned Northern California in 2018, Clint developed a plan and led the region's response, including securing funding for millions of dollars in emergency sediment and erosion control work to help protect salmon habitat and critical water supplies. Clint's dedication to public service, the board, its employees, along with his numerous professional and personal accomplishments at the board, set an incredible standard for leadership and encourage others to find new and innovative ways of advancing the mission of the Central Valley Water Board. For this and for so much more, Clint is highly deserving of this Sustained Superior Accomplishment Award. I really want to take a moment to recognize you, Clint, and to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the work that you've done here at the Central Valley Water Board and the leadership, both professionally and personally, that you've provided to your staff, to myself, and to the board itself in the years that you've been with the board. So much, much thanks to you.
Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate that.
And I'd simply like to add that being a one board, so to speak, has brought with it the ability to be more productive, quite frankly, and to avoid a lot of pitfalls that we were experiencing as time went on before. So the work that's gone forth, being led by Clint and others, is really commendable and will serve the board well in the years to come. And Clint, you seem to be a man of many talents. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And I just might say that for the other folks that received awards, they are representative of the kind of staff that work for us. They're innovative, they're hardworking. I've heard that the problems with them not having to commute is that they're actually putting in more time working than they have in the past. That goes for many of the staff. It's a horrible time that we're in, but the fact that that staff was able to accomplish what they're accomplishing is truly commendable. Thank you all. Thank you all very much.
I just add something, Clint. I really appreciate your efforts on the wildfire front in particular, and I know your staff looks up to you, and you demonstrated great leadership on that. I don't think you realized in 2018 that was literally your trial by fire, and it's not. It was the beginning of the wildfire nightmare that we're going to be facing, I think, moving forward every year. I mean, I think we have a red flag warning coming up here this weekend even. So it's December, and the wildfire season just gets longer and longer. And appreciate your efforts on that front a great deal. Thanks.
Yes.
Well said, Mark. In fact, the problems we've had in years past has been the reluctance of agencies to do controlled burns because of the pushback from folks that had homes in wildfire areas. I think we've burned enough homes now that it really points to the importance of carrying out controlled burns and other fire prevention efforts. I was toying with the idea of showing the remains of some homes in the area where my family has a cabin. And it was only one of two structures that got through that fire intact, but decided against it. It deviates too much from our meeting. Just suffice it to say, it was much like what you see in other areas. There's nothing left but a pile of ashes and a few things that don't burn well, like sinks and so forth. It's a terrible sight. Any further comments?
Yes, Dr. Longley, I would just like to acknowledge Clint and all the other staff that received recognition today. A tremendous acknowledgement for the work that the recipients today have done. Clint and all of the staff, I mean, all of the AEOs, the organization, Patrick, during this pandemic, you've done tremendous work prior to the pandemic. I said when I first came on the board, I had never seen such professionalism in my experience in city government. How you pull things together, how you deal with the difficult tasks, the coordination that Clint's done with the three offices, combining them into one to work where they function and all the pieces come together the way they're supposed to be. I just like to give kudos to the organization, the whole team, for the tremendous amount of work you're doing, and particularly during this pandemic. And everybody is at risk for, contracting the virus if they're not complying and doing everything they need to do. But I'm very confident in the organization, the staff that we have here, the tremendous work that you're doing. You're continuing to set an example, and I'm very much appreciative for all that you do to protect water quality and to represent this organization well. So my kudos to the whole organization, and particularly those that received the acknowledgement today. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Denise. Any further comments?
I do want to thank the board for those sentiments. It's not easy these days. I think that everybody's fatigued. Many people have suffered personal losses. And I think that hearing that from you is very important and helps us keep our eyes on the mission and working towards the common goal and trying to see that light at the end of the tunnel for this particular thing. So thank you so much for those sentiments.
Very good. Unless there's something else, we'll move on to agenda item 7. We'll give it a third try.
Yeah, might want to give it a fourth. I think we could move to agenda item 13, the uncontested calendar, and get that out of the way before we proceed into the substantive kind of update of the Diazinon Chlorpyrifos program and basin plan amendments. I think there's a bunch of folks who are still watching, perhaps in their pajamas, but they're still watching and tuned in to see what we do with the uncontested calendar, and we can get rid of that.
Let some folks go back to work or whatever they're going to go back to bed or whatever. Okay, we'll move to agenda item 13, the uncontested calendar. This is the time and place for a public hearing to consider uncontested items 9 through 12. Janelle, has anyone submitted an email requesting to comment on any of these uncontested items?
Dr. Longley, there is somebody listed, but they will raise their hand if they wish to speak. And they said they likely will not need to speak, but they wanted to be here just in case.
Very good. Are there any late revisions?
We do have one late revision. Item number 10A.
Right.
It's factual correction, and the discharger is aware of the correction and okay with it.
Okay. I'll then ask for a motion and a second.
Well, if I could, just for the record, I believe the commenter who said that they may comment if necessary is a representative of King's Waste and Recycling Authority, who is one of the dischargers that would receive WDRs. Please speak up and correct me if I'm wrong there. Otherwise, we will proceed with the vote.
And just to clarify, Adam, which agenda item was 10A, just so we're on the same page?
10A is waste discharge requirements for Aerojet Rocketdyne Incorporated, White Rock North Dump, and Aerojet Waste Consolidation Unit landfill in Sacramento County.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
This is Carmen. I would move the uncontested calendar with the late revision.
Thank
I'll
you.
second it, Dr. Longley.
Okay. Carmen has moved, including the late revision, and Denise has seconded.
Now, would you read the roll?
Board Member Bradford,
Yes.
Board Member Brar,
Yes.
Board Member Kadara,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ramirez,
Yes.
Chair Longley.
Yes. Motion carries. Good. We'll give a fourth attempt now at agenda item 7. This time the board will hear an update on the Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos control program. This is an information item only and no action will be taken, although the board may ask questions to provide direction to staff. After the staff presentation, interested persons will be allowed 3 minutes each to address the board. We'll now hear the board presentation.
Okay, good morning. I just want to verify that the correct screen shows. Okay,
Hi,
are you
Sam.
seeing it
Are you sharing your screen?
in just a
Green?
minute?
There we go. It's coming up right now. There we go. We see it.
Okay, great. Good morning, Chair Longley and members of the board. My name is Samantha Mello, and I'm an environmental scientist working in the Central Valley Water Board's pesticide TMDL unit. Joining me today is Danny McClure, who is the senior engineer for the pesticide TMDL unit. For the purpose of this informational item is to update the board on the effectiveness of the Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos control programs, the most recent of which was adopted by the board in 2014. I will first be covering some background information on Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos and the control programs adopted by the board to date. Then I will be summarizing the effectiveness of the regulatory programs at reducing concentrations of Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos in surface waters throughout the Central Valley. Lastly, I will summarize staff's conclusions and recommendations moving forward. Let's begin with some background. Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos are organophosphate insecticides that have historically been heavily used in both agricultural and urban settings. Due to the phasing out of urban uses for both insecticides, both are now primarily used in the agricultural setting. The predominant water quality concern with these insecticides is their toxicity to aquatic life. Monitoring starting in the late 1980s and early 1990s found widespread toxicity to the aquatic invertebrate test organism Cerodaphnia dubia, which you will see here to the right. Further monitoring resulted in the documentation of multiple surface water impairments in the Central Valley, where concentrations exceeded the water quality objectives established for the protection of aquatic life. These impaired surface waters included the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers, the Delta, as well as numerous tributaries. Drinking water beneficial uses were not determined to be impaired in the Central Valley, since thresholds for human health impacts are 1 or more orders of magnitude higher than the threshold for impacts to aquatic life. Since Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos have similar modes of action, they act additively in their toxicity. They are not highly persistent in the environment, lasting for days to months, as opposed to legacy pesticides like DDT, which persist for decades. However, because they are easily transported in water, they have been frequently detected downstream of agricultural and urban areas. Both can be toxic to aquatic invertebrates at low concentrations. This graphic illustrates the primary processes for movement of these pesticides to surface waters. In this picture, Pesticides are being applied to a dormant orchard in the winter. In orchards, the pesticide is generally sprayed from the ground by an air blast sprayer towed behind a tractor. Some can drift or volatilize and redeposit directly into surface water, and some of it can remain in the air until a rain event occurs. When it rains, pesticide residue in the air can be absorbed by rainwater, which can then enter surface waters, and pesticide remaining on the trees or the orchard floor can run off and be transported to surface waters. Pesticides also move off-site during dry weather. A similar scenario occurs during the dry season, but the pesticides move off-site via irrigation runoff or drift. In the early to mid-2000s, the Central Valley Water Board adopted and implemented a series of control programs and total maximum daily loads, or TMDLs, to address the water quality issues caused by Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos. In 2003, the Sacramento and Feather Rivers TMDL was adopted for Diazinon, and then the TMDL was revised in 2007 to add Chlorpyrifos. In 2005, the San Joaquin River TMDL was adopted for both Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos, and in 2006, the Delta TMDL was adopted for both insecticides. Each of these TMDLs included numeric water quality objectives, TMDL allocations, and implementation and monitoring provisions. These TMDLs addressed impairments in several large water bodies on an individual basis. However, with widespread impairments being observed throughout the Central Valley, there was a need for a basin-wide control program that would address these impairments in a more proactive manner. So in 2014, the board adopted the Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos control program. This control program established basin-wide water quality objectives, used a TMDL alternative approach, established monitoring requirements, and included a mechanism to address current and future impairments through the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. Among those regulatory actions taken by the Central Valley Water Board, there have also been regulatory actions taken by other agencies. The actions taken by other agencies were adopted for both the protection of water quality and for the protection of human health from all routes of exposure, including air, dust, food, and water. This timeline will show the key regulatory actions which have significantly affected and or will significantly affect Diazinon and or Chlorpyrifos concentrations in Central Valley surface waters. You will see regulatory actions taken by the Central Valley Water Board along the top of the timeline, and regulatory actions taken by other agencies will appear along the bottom of the timeline momentarily. Regulatory actions taken for Diazinon appear in blue, for Chlorpyrifos in orange, and actions affecting both insecticides appear in white. Beginning with the regional board regulatory actions along the top of the timeline, you will see that in 2003, the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, or ILRP, was initiated. In the same year, this was followed by the adoption of the Sacramento and Feather Rivers TMDL, the San Joaquin River TMDL in 2005, the Delta TMDL in 2006, a revision to the Sacramento and Feather Rivers TMDL in 2007 when Chlorpyrifos was added, and finally, the basin-wide Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos control program in 2014. Moving now to the bottom of the timeline, we begin the regulatory actions adopted by other agencies with the US EPA cancellation of nearly all non-agricultural sales of Chlorpyrifos. This action was taken to protect human health from all possible routes of exposure. In 2004, a similar regulation was passed by US EPA for Diazinon, but this time canceling all non-agricultural uses. In 2006, the Department of Pesticide Regulation, or DPR, adopted dormant spray regulations to control runoff and spray drift from winter applications of pesticides, including Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos, to dormant orchards. In 2015, mainly for the protection of human health from all routes of exposure, DPR classified Chlorpyrifos as a restricted use pesticide, meaning that anyone using or selling a Chlorpyrifos product was now required by law to be licensed or certified. Finally, this year in 2020, once again for the protection of human health from all routes of exposure, the state of California canceled all remaining agricultural uses of chlorpyrifos. Sales of chlorpyrifos for agricultural use ended in February 2020, and after December 31st, 2020, it will be illegal to possess or use agricultural products containing chlorpyrifos. Looking at the 2014 control program in a little more detail now, the control program contains numeric water quality objectives for Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos, with implementation provisions being exercised through the ILRP and National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permits to achieve the numeric water quality objectives. Attainment was required as soon as possible, but no later than 2027, which is 10 years from the date the control program became approved and effective. Monitoring is required to determine if dischargers are maintaining compliance with the water quality objectives. Specific sites and timing of monitoring were not included in this control program, but rather a requirement that the monitoring should meet specific goals outlined in the control program was included. The control program also requires that all the impaired water bodies under the purview of this control program were to be characterized, either through direct or representative monitoring. Agricultural dischargers of Diazinon and or Chlorpyrifos to impaired water bodies are required to submit management plans which describe the actions the discharger will take to meet the water quality objectives. The control program also required that management plans be developed if exceedances are observed during the required monitoring. Where representative monitoring is used, management plans are required to address how compliance will be achieved in all of the represented water bodies. The control program uses a TMDL alternative approach rather than the traditional establishment of TMDLs to address impaired water bodies. And to ensure coverage for any unregulated sources, a conditional prohibition was included, which prohibits any discharges of Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos above water quality concentrations from unregulated sources. To ensure transparency and success, there was considerable stakeholder involvement in the development of this control program, and an intent to provide the board with a review of the program's progress every 7 years was included in the basin plan language.
Could you go back to that slide, please? Could you provide a little bit of clarification on the fourth bullet up from the bottom, the TMDL alternative approach? What is the TMDL alternative approach?
So rather than creating a TMDL for each individual water body, you can categorize water bodies under something called 4B in the integrated report. And basically that can, if you can show that impairments can be addressed by any other program besides a TMDL, such as this control program, monitoring provisions and implementation provisions, then you can categorize it as a TMDL alternative approach. And then you don't have to create a TMDL for every individual water body.
I see. And that was the integration of the irrigated lands program into the control for these pesticides. Is that correct or not?
You mean, I'm sorry, can you clarify that question?
Yeah. So was that part of the implementation of these control measures for these pesticides under the irrigated lands program part of the TMDL alternative approach?
No,
yes.
Those are, yeah, okay.
Sorry.
Thanks, Dan.
Yes, that is what we relied upon to provide assurances to EPA that the impairment would be addressed.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is a map of the project area covered by the control program. In the upper right corner, you will find the project area in the context of our region. The entire state of California is shown with the outline of Region 5, the Central Valley region, indicated by the light gray area, and the project area within the region indicated by black. Moving back to the larger map now, which shows the project area in detail, as you can see, the control program includes the Sacramento and San Joaquin River basins below the major dams and around the outer edges of the valley, such as Folsom and Orville. The area below those dams helps define the boundary between the lower foothills and the valley floor. This is the area in the Sacramento-San Joaquin River basins where most of the Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos have been used, and where all of these impairments from the pesticides occur. In the development of these control programs, management practices were identified that have allowed growers to maintain productivity while reducing the discharges of the 2 pesticides to meet the water quality objectives. Briefly summarized, the numerous available management practices can be classified as pest management practices, pesticide application practices, vegetation management practices, and water management practices. Pest management practices include activities such as use of less toxic pesticides to reduce pest pressure when feasible, or only applying a pesticide when pest monitoring indicates that it is truly necessary. On the left here, you can see a gentleman who used a sweep net to survey the pest population of the field crops behind him. This is one way to determine if pesticides will need to be applied to the orchard, but it can also help to determine if beneficial insects are present. On the right, you will see a navel orangeworm trap, which uses pheromones to attract and then trap pests, helping to keep pest populations under control. Improvements can be made to the way pesticides are applied. An example of this pesticide application management is to calibrate application equipment more frequently to minimize over-application. More precise application technologies are also available, such as smart sprayers. Here you can see a photo of a tractor using smart spraying technology to turn nozzles on the spray rig on and off to target only the vines. Specific applications also using an end-to-end management software to track and store pesticide application data. That data can then be used to identify areas where application practices can be improved. Pesticide applicators are also required to follow the existing product labels and regulations, which include requirements to reduce overspray and drift. Vegetation can be managed through practices such as cover crops and buffer strips, which can reduce runoff and decrease drift. The photo here shows the difference between conventional farming, which is the field on the right half of the photo, and in a field with vegetation management practices being implemented, which you can see on the left half of the photo. The field on the left has cover crops, reduced tillage, and cattle grazing occurring. Water management practices can include the numerous more efficient irrigation systems and practices, management of drainage water, irrigation scheduling, and crop-specific irrigation management, all of which reduce irrigation runoff. Here you can see a photo of a drip irrigation system being used, which not only helps establish better plant health, but also reduces water use and water loss. Many of these practices we just reviewed have other benefits besides reducing pesticide concentrations. These practices can reduce runoff of sediment, nutrients, and other pollutants and chemicals, and these practices can reduce water use and water waste. Now let's talk about the effectiveness of the regulatory programs we've discussed so far. Implementing this control program and existing TMDLs has been a major focus of the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, with notable cooperation from coalitions, growers, and researchers involved. ILRP has widespread monitoring for pesticides included in these control programs, which has significantly increased the amount of data collected throughout the region. The coalitions have conducted outreach to growers on the need to reduce concentrations. This outreach, in addition to the widespread monitoring, have been pivotal pieces in tracking exceedance sources and implementing management practices to reduce or eliminate the source of exceedances. As a result, there have been widespread improvements in practices across the project area. To get an idea of how use trends have been behaving, we pulled use data from the Department of Pesticide Regulations database for the years 1990 through 2016 for every county in the project area for this control program. At the time of this data analysis, this was the most recent available data. This data is reported in pounds of each chemical applied per year. Here, the blue line below represents Diazinon use, and the orange line above represents Chlorpyrifos use. As you can see, from 1990 through 2016, the use trends for both insecticides has been declining. Without claiming a causal relationship, we wanted to identify along this timeline the years when the regulations I discussed previously were adopted, which you can see represented by this purple shaded area. Water Board staff analyzed concentration data from various sources and compared that data to the numeric water quality objectives to determine the frequency of exceedances as a way to assess how successful reduction efforts have been. For the purpose of this data analysis, Water Board staff divided the water bodies into categories based on hydrology, hydrologic modification, and/or primary land use or uses in the observed watershed. Here, you can also see examples of water bodies that fall under each category. Categories are as follows. Agricultural drains are water bodies constructed for the purpose of conveying agricultural waters, including canals, drains, and lateral waterways. Some examples include Bishop's Cut, Burnett Lateral, and Lateral 2.5. Agricultural streams are natural streams in a watershed primarily dominated by agricultural land, including Bear Creek, Berenda Slough, and Little Johns Creek. Urban streams are natural streams in watersheds dominated by urban land, such as Arcade Creek and Chicken Ranch Slough. Major constructed water bodies are any major water body that is man-made, including major canals, aqueducts, and drains. Examples include the Grant Line Canal and Yolo Bypass. And lastly, other natural water bodies are water bodies that occur naturally and are contained within watersheds dominated by multiple land uses and are neither exclusively agricultural nor urban. This includes natural rivers, creeks, and sloughs such as Cache Creek and the San Joaquin River. This slide shows the findings of that data analysis for chlorpyrifos concentration data collected between 2011 and 2017. Oops, sorry about that. You will see on the key to the right of the graph that the color of each bar represents one of the water body categories we outlined on the previous slide. Please also note the number of samples analyzed for each year as denoted under the year on the x-axis. While agricultural streams have consistently demonstrated the highest number of exceedances each year, the number of exceedances each year has also consistently been declining, indicating that the adoption and implementation of regulatory programs has been effective at reducing chlorpyrifos concentrations. While outside the scope of this data review, it should be noted that chlorpyrifos concentrations in the 1990s and 2000s were much higher than indicated here. This slide shows Diazinon exceedances from 2011 to 2017. While Diazinon has far fewer exceedances annually than chlorpyrifos, the ones that do appear are mostly from agricultural streams, with a few others from major constructed water bodies and one exceedance each from an agricultural drain and a natural water body. However, as you can see from the graph, the number of exceedances is overall very small. And as with chlorpyrifos, while outside the scope of this data review, it should be noted that Diazinon concentrations in the 1990s and 2000s were much higher than indicated here. To briefly highlight the central findings of the data we analyzed, agricultural streams constituted most of the recent exceedances and are where the highest concentrations of Diazinon and chlorpyrifos have been observed. But overall, we've seen a significant decrease in both detections and exceedances. There has been increased management practice implementation by growers, and exceedances of water quality objectives have decreased as a result. These improved agricultural management practices, used in combination with the widespread monitoring that has been implemented, will be an effective approach to apply to future replacement products. The cancellation of urban products has eliminated nearly all exceedances in urban areas, and we expect that downward trend to continue. While we want to emphasize the overall success of these regulatory programs, there are, however, some remaining issues. The monitoring design adopted by the ILRP coalitions includes representative sites. This means that as monitoring transitioned to these representative sites, not every water body would continue to be monitored. So for a small number of sites that were listed as impaired before the transition to the ILRP monitoring design, there is no new data being collected, and there's no way to assess these specific sites for possible delisting. A separate issue we noted was that the data collected at a handful of monitoring sites had repeated exceedances. In some cases, these repeated exceedances could potentially be attributed to cropland that is associated with dairies or confined animal feeding operation parcels, which are not currently covered by ILRP requirements. Finally, I'm going to discuss our conclusions and recommendations. First and foremost, these control programs implemented mainly by the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program have been successful. Implementation of pesticide use regulations by the Department of Pesticide Regulation and county agricultural commissioners has also contributed to improved practices and reduced concentrations. As the data presented show, exceedances of the objectives are increasingly infrequent. We expect that the 2027 water quality objective attainment date will be met. It is also important to note that we were observing reductions in chlorpyrifos use, detections, and exceedances well before the 2020 cancellation date. With the attainment of the water quality objectives, these pesticides will no longer be significantly contributing to toxicity in the Central Valley waters. The regulatory approaches the board used for Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos and practices implemented by dischargers will be effective at reducing concentrations of other pesticides. Further documentation of successful Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos water quality improvements are available through the water quality report cards, which are part of the board's performance reports, and through non-point source program success stories, which are available on our website or upon request. While there have been several delistings, the number of listed or impaired water bodies on the 303D list is not reflective of all improvements, since waters cannot be delisted without new monitoring data, and there's a lack of data on several water bodies. Finally, staff make the following recommendations based on our review of these control programs. The basin control programs have been effective, so no changes to the basin plan are needed. Confined animal feeding operation and dairy orders should be updated to reflect the monitoring requirements and management practice implementation requirements that were adopted as part of the Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos control program. Continuing to implement the control programs mainly through the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program will continue to be effective. Samples should be collected from historically listed water bodies so they can be assessed for potential removal from the 303D list. And lastly, updates on the Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos control programs should be provided only if data indicate any ongoing issues. And for efficiency, these updates should be integrated with updates on other pesticide issues. That is the last slide of my presentation, so I'm ready to open for questions and comments.
There was no data shown for exceedance. Excuse me. Is somebody else getting feedback? Okay, that's me talking.
Sounds like there's a monster on the line.
Does anybody else have comments?
Dr. Longley, we do have Debbie Webster who would like to speak on this item, and she represents the California, sorry, I got to blow it up, sorry. Central Valley Clean Water Association.
Central Valley Water Quality Association. Go ahead, Debsy.
Well, good morning, Chair Longley and board members. It really is good to see you. It's been a while, and just wanted to talk a little bit about this, and maybe a little bit about the recommendations. So, as you heard from this TLMDL program, there was a lot of management practices put in there, and it does impact especially our NPDES permitting program. With monitoring. And although our constituents, our member agencies are not major sources, they still participate in this, they do monitoring, they have other requirements that are actually quite costly. And I think the two take-home points that I'd like to share with you is just really kind of the effectiveness of appropriate regulation of pesticides. So the fact that we're seeing not only the management practices be effective, but really the removal of chlorpyrifos and diazinon from the market, seeing that as being a near zero area. But with the basin plan amendment remaining, one of the concerns that we still have is that we still are required to do a significant amount of monitoring and put monies towards that. So our recommendation actually would be to allow those basin plan amendments to reduce those monitoring requirements, to see those reductions in our permits so that our resources could actually be put towards areas where there is a problem. So doing a lot of monitoring where there's non-detects for years and years and years is actually not a solution that we really would like. We'd like to see some changes that would allow that flexibility, at least for our permitting program.
Thank you. Any questions for Debbie?
No, but this is Carmen. I'm glad that she's talking about this because, you know, what she's saying makes sense.
Okay. Any further comments? Thank you very much, Debbie.
Thank you.
Dr. Longley, I had a question for Samantha. And this was in regards to how do you handle the repeated exceedances that she had mentioned earlier? This is right before the last 1 or 2 slides. I'm curious as to how you handle those exceedances. Is that where you deal with the integrate requirements into the confined animal facilities, or how is that being addressed? Samantha?
Sorry, it would help if I unmuted myself. Yeah, so that was actually the basis for our recommendation to update, the dairy and confined animal feeding operation orders. Is because the areas where we're seeing those repeated exceedances, ILRP has done their part to reach out to their members and control discharges to the best of their ability. But there are other influences within those watersheds that are not under ILRP's jurisdiction to control. So we're recommending, because a lot of the times it's dairy or CAFO parcels, we're recommending that those orders be updated in order to address those possible influences.
And will those orders be, will the orders for animal facilities for CAFOs be updated in the near future? Is that on the plan?
I know that they're currently working on updating the bovine order. I have not heard anything about the confined animal feeding operation order being updated, but the bovine order is in the process of including those requirements.
And are you referring to the dairy order?
The dairy order has already been updated. I believe there's also a poultry order, but I'm not so sure we're concerned with that as much as we are with the bovine.
Okay, but the dairy order has been updated.
That's correct.
And you were stating, but there was a statement earlier that it was suspected that there may be some contribution from the dairies. But I would say then if the dairy order has been updated, we are addressing that at this point. Is that correct?
I'm sorry. I think I got it backwards. There's a dairy order and a bovine order, and I'm mixing them up. The bovine order is the one that, I'm sorry, Danny, do you remember, which one has been updated and which one needs to be updated?
I believe that hopefully someone from those programs can step in, or someone overseeing those programs.
Possibly Adam.
But I believe it was the bovine order, and the dairy order is waiting on an update. Adam and that they all can be updated. I don't know what the exact plan is, but that would be a question for Adam or management.
I think Patrick, if you could speak a little bit about this. I can speak a little bit about just the Irrigated Lands has a coalition-based surface water monitoring program where we look at receiving water in a regional way, and we find these problems. Irrigated Lands isn't always the only source in these watersheds, and we sometimes don't know. We suspect there could be a dairy influence. And our staff are working actually with dairy staff and have been working with dairy staff to try and figure these things out. So I don't know that we need to do a change to the dairy order right now. I think, we can work through the current system we have. But I do know that, for a long time now, and Clay's on, and I did chat with him a little bit about this. We have tried to figure out how, whether or not a coalition-like surface water regional monitoring program may be needed at some point.
First of all, I understand that the dairy order is on the back burner for revision. When might that occur?
So to step back even further, the idea is that I think that the bovine order was adopted subsequent to the revisions to the Diazinon Chlorpyrifos program. That's why some of the requirements are integrated into the bovine program. Again, both the bovine and dairy general orders focus primarily on contributions to groundwater. So as Sammy's presentation mentioned, the contributions for Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos are mostly drift or overspray. So when coalition monitoring and Irrigated Lands Coalition monitoring sees a hit, it could potentially come from the dairies. It could potentially come from dairy acreage. It could potentially come from bovine acreage. That's why additional monitoring is going to be required. And it's not surface water monitoring per se. It's what are your practices and what are your education for your growers to make sure that they're not using these pesticides in a manner that could impact surface waters. That's really what the kind of signal and response is within those programs. In terms of the revisions to the dairy general order, we have a package that is actually nearly ready to go. It would kind of bring the dairy order into alignment with the bovine order in many respects. The issue is that the dairy general order is under review by the State Water Board, and so that process has to roll out before we get involved in a substantial overhaul to the dairy general order. And ideally, we figure out what the State Board's order will be. They have scientists, engineers, and geologists and attorneys working on that review because of the way the separation function goes. It's an appellate review. We have not been involved in many of those conversations, if at all, but they have been telling us for the past few months that they are taking action. Consistently in my conversations with State Board Executive Management, we've been asking them, please, whatever your decision will be, daylight it so we can plan accordingly as we kind of revise our program. The idea really is we will have to spend some money to kind of make sure that we have the CEQA and any CEQA requirements dialed in before we move forward with the revision to the dairy general order. All of that can be lost money if it's and money that we can't, re-up if it conflicts with what the State Board wants to do from a policy perspective with the regulation of dairies in the Central Valley. So that's really the big tension there. And in terms of a timeline, the State Board almost for the past year has been unable to provide one.
Yeah, and these two materials are now for the most part prohibited. And you point out it's overspray. So the next question I would have is, what are the replacement materials and what is the toxicity of those materials? If they have some toxicity, maybe not as much, or regardless, overspray would still be an issue.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the conversation and some of the, kind of the big programmatic, we've got Danny runs basically a pesticide unit looking at, overall toxicity and when there's substitution out from one constituent to another. Neonicotinoids are one that have been used as kind of one of the pesticide management protocols in the Central Valley. I think what we see is the catch-22 that we see whenever we regulate these type of constituents as we switch from Diazinon to Chlorpyrifos is we like the fact that the chemicals are more effective in smaller doses and have shorter lives. However, the challenge, and I think Debbie can absolutely echo this, the challenge is when you have a really, really effective chemical that can be used at super low doses and so that doesn't have a lot of environmental impacts, it's really expensive and really difficult to test for it because you're talking about extremely minute chemical amounts. So I think we have to be sensitive to the fact that we don't want to impose a regulatory program that phases out a chemical for a chemical that is more damaging to the environment. And so that's kind of one of Danny's big challenges in kind of managing that program. But I think to answer your question, neonicotinoids are one area that we're looking for. We're looking at toxicity data. We're looking at what the appropriate regulatory approach would be, whether they're in conformance with overlapping programs with the Department of Pesticide Regulation. So it's a whole milieu of regulations that we look at when we move forward with developing a TMDL or a basin plan amendment to deal with these particular constituents.
Well, Dr. Longley, if I could add, the other major replacement product is pyrethroids, and we do have a control program for them and monitoring.
So we're looking for them also, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And have we seen an uptick with these others being phased out? Have we seen an uptick in pyrethroids or not?
Generally, over the years, there has been an increase in pyrethroid concentrations, but the magnitude and extent of the toxicity we see from pyrethroids is nowhere near what we saw for the Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos. Pyrethroids are a lot less mobile, so they're easier to control from the runoff, and I think that's and just practices have also improved in general. So I think for those reasons, there's still some issues to deal with pyrethroids, and there's going to be some challenges, but it's not nearly as bad at the extent of toxicity as we saw with the organophosphates, Diazinon and Chlorpyrifos particularly.
Thank you very much, Danny.
Yeah, no, and I would emphasize to all the board members, I think Danny hit the nail on the head. An uptick isn't necessarily bad. It's whether we're driving down toxicity, water column toxicity, sediment toxicity is really what the ultimate goal is.
Well, I can only partially agree with that. Uptick is of concern and has to be investigated. Certainly, and there are other tests, as we well know, to determine the amount of toxicity that's imparting to the water. But I'm satisfied that we're making great progress, and I guess if we hear this again in the future, I'd like to hear a discussion of the replacement items, in this case pyrethroids, as part of that discussion. Thank you. Any further comments?
Dr. Longley, there are not any more commenters listed on the blue card comment.
Okay, we're finished then with agenda item 7, unless someone else has a comment to make. Seeing none, we're ready for agenda item 8, and I'm going to give us a 10-minute break here. Please be back at 11:45. Okay, now we're ready to come back into session. Next on the agenda is agenda item 8, revisions to the Basin Plan amendments for the Salt and Nitrate Control Program, otherwise known as CV salts. This is the time and place for a hearing to receive oral comments and to consider a resolution revising amendments to the water quality control plans with the Sacramento, San Joaquin River and Tulare Lake basins for a region-wide salt and nitrate control program. This hearing will be conducted in accordance with the notice of public hearing and meeting procedures published with the meeting agenda. At this time, testimony should be introduced on whether the proposed action should be taken. All persons expecting to testify, please stand at this time, raise your right hand, and take the following oath. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth? If so, answer I do.
I do.
After the staff presentation, interested persons will be allowed 3 minutes each to address the board. Please state your name, address, and affiliation before speaking. Does council have any legal issues to discuss at this time?
Not at this time.
Thank you. We'll now hear the staff presentation.
There we go. Jenny, we see it.
Okay, do you see the full slides now?
We do.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Chair Longley and members of the board. My name is Jennifer Fuller, and I am a senior environmental scientist in the Rancho Cordova office, and I do need to take the oath. Oh, sorry, I just did. I was reading my notes. I am here today regarding proposed adoption of revisions to the Salt and Nitrate Control Program for the Sacramento River Basin and San Joaquin River Basin and Tulare Lake Basin water quality control plans. Before I get started with the main presentation, I want to provide everyone with a quick summary of why we are here today to consider adoption of these revisions. The Salt and Nitrate Control Program was developed in response to extensive salt and nitrate accumulations in Central Valley, surface waters, and groundwaters. These accumulations have human health, economic, and environmental impacts. After Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board adoption in May of 2018, the Salt and Nitrate Control Program was approved by the State Water Resources Control Board, pending targeted revisions in October of 2019. It was subsequently approved by the Office of Administrative Law in January 2020 and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in November of 2020. Though implementation has begun with these approvals, the State Board directed revisions are required to be initiated by January 17, 2021. I am here today to present the proposed revisions directed by the State Board, as well as clarification revisions proposed by the Regional Board for consideration of adoption into the basin plans. For our presentation today, I will first discuss a brief background of the Salt and Nitrate Control Program. Then I will present State Board directed revisions, clarification revisions, including late revisions proposed by the staff of the Regional Board, revisions to the original Basin Plan amendments from the EPA review, and public comments and Regional Board staff responses. Lastly, I will discuss Regional Board staff recommendations and next steps if these revisions are adopted today. I will now discuss the history of the Salt and Nitrate Control Program. The Salt and Nitrate Control Program started in response to severe salt and nitrate impairments in Central Valley surface and groundwaters, including major impacts to drinking water, agriculture, and the environment. These impairments result from historic and ongoing discharges from agricultural, municipal, and industrial activities, as well as natural occurrence, and affect all 3 watershed basins of the Central Valley, the Sacramento River, San Joaquin River, and Tulare Lake basins. To address salt and nitrate impacts, a collaborative stakeholder initiative called CV Salts began in 2006. It stands for Central Valley Salinity Alternatives for Long-Term Sustainability. This initiative involved many different stakeholders, including representatives from the water boards, agriculture, municipalities, industry, water supply, environmental justice, federal and state agencies, and the public. Together, this group of stakeholders developed a Central Valley-wide salt and nitrate management plan. This salt and nitrate management plan was accepted by the regional board in 2017 and was used to develop the Salt and Nitrate Control Program Basin Plan amendments. The Salt and Nitrate Control Program consists of a prioritized nitrate control program with an individual or management zone permitting approach, and a phased salt control program with a conservative or alternative permitting approach. The salt control program includes surface water and groundwater, and the nitrate control program applies to groundwater. The regional board adopted the Basin Plan amendments for the Salt and Nitrate Control Program in May of 2018. After the Salt and Nitrate Control Program was adopted by the regional board in 2018, the amendments were brought to the state board for approval in October 2019. A number of concerns were brought up by stakeholders and state board members during that meeting, which resulted in an approval of the original amendments pending targeted revisions, which are detailed in the state board approving resolution. The more immediate implementation concerns were addressed in the resolution as understandings and directions so that implementation could commence. Many of these concerns were also incorporated into the current revisions. And the concerns for long-term implementation aspects were addressed by directing the regional board to initiate targeted revisions by January 17, 2021. The main areas of state board directed revisions pertain to the overarching goals of the program, general aspects of the Salt and Nitrate Control Program, the Nitrate Control Program management zones, including early action plans, and policies regarding offsets, exceptions, variances, and drought and conservation. The original overall goals of the Salt and Nitrate Control Program are listed here. These goals have been revised to reflect state board direction that the final outcome of goal number 2 change from achieving balanced salt and nitrate loading to reducing salt and nitrate loading. This change is shown in bold in the revised goals here. Therefore, the proposed goals are: number 1, ensure safe drinking water supply; number 2, reduce salt and nitrate loading so that ongoing discharges neither threaten to degrade high-quality waters absent appropriate findings by the Central Valley Water Board, nor cause or contribute to exceedances of water quality objectives; and number 3, implement long-term managed restoration of impaired water bodies. The Salt and Nitrate Control Program was revised to include these general revisions: confirmation that the regional board will take all appropriate actions for all designated beneficial uses to be protected unless a de-designation of a beneficial use is amended in a basin plan, and confirmation that standards for all designated beneficial uses will not be altered unless adoption of a site-specific water quality objective is amended in a basin plan. Additionally, a maximum of 50 years was set as a goal to achieve nitrate objectives in basins. The Nitrate Control Program was revised to clarify the limitation for managed nitrate basin restoration in the Basin Plan amendments only to the extent where reasonable, feasible, and practical to do so, does not create new standards for de-designation of beneficial uses or adoption of less stringent site-specific objectives. This limitation is derived from existing provisions in applicable laws, including the Porter-Cologne Water Quality Control Act. Also clarified is the regional board determinations about commencement or continuation of managed aquifer restoration activities shall be made in the context of a future proposed Basin Plan amendment to either de-designate beneficial uses or adopt site-specific water quality objectives. The Nitrate Control Program management zone revisions added detailed parameters for management zone delineation and review, as well as a process for the regional board modification of management zone boundaries if the delineation is found to inappropriately exclude regions with nitrate exceedances. Additionally, the revisions removed the ability of management zones to use volume-weighted averaging to allocate assimilative capacity as an alternative compliance method. The management zone revisions also added provisions for meaningful consultation for affected parties concerning early action plans and management zone implementation plans, review of those plans every 2 years, a sampling program to identify residential drinking water systems with nitrate exceedances, and a requirement of management zone implementation plans to address the operation and maintenance costs of potential solutions, especially for disadvantaged communities. The offset policy was revised to add required parameters for offsets, including prohibition of an offset as an alternative compliance method if it affects potential drinking water sources, that it must result in net water quality benefit and maximum benefit to the people of the state, that absent the offset, the beneficial results would not be achieved as quickly, that reductions associated with the offset are not required by other laws or regulations unless the beneficial uses would occur more quickly than required, and that the offset has a term limit maximum of 10 years. The exceptions policy originally maintained a nitrate exception period for a maximum of 50 years and required a regional board public review of a status report from the discharger every 5 years. This policy was revised to require nitrate exceptions to be as short as practicable, not exceeding 35 years, and that the regional board public status report review every 5 years will evaluate and modify term lengths as necessary to ensure that term lengths are kept as short as practicable. The variance and drought and conservation policies were revised to no longer allow multi-discharger variances, and the drought and conservation policy was also revised to limit interim permit limits for secondary maximum contaminant levels. The next slides detail overarching clarification modifications that the regional board staff proposes to include in the revisions to the salt and nitrate control program basin plan amendments. These were in addition to minor clarification and non-substantive edits. The main areas of clarification revisions are salt control program permitting approach delineation values, the addition of nitrate control program sections for consistency with the salt control program and timeline specifications, as well as a correction to a previous oversight in the agriculture section and a section on late revisions. The regional board staff proposes revisions to clarify that in the salt control program for the salinity permitting approaches, only site-specific numeric objectives adopted into the basin plan shall be considered as site-specific delineation values. The original version allowed use of site-specific numeric values for protection of beneficial uses that were previously applied to a discharge but not adopted in a basin plan. Another proposed revision is inclusion of an exception to the above modification, which are footnoted site-specific values that specifically qualify to be used as delineation values. This is due to their robust development as site-specific numeric interpretations to protect the agriculture or AGR beneficial use and the municipal and domestic supply or MUN beneficial use for the specified dischargers. These site-specific values are not intended to be used as water quality objectives, only as protective delineation threshold values for the salinity permitting approaches. Also proposed are revisions to the nitrate control program to add 2 clarifying sections to maintain consistency with the salt control program. These sections detail parameters for failing to comply with the nitrate control program, as well as modification of a previously elected path. After consultation with State Board, Regional Board staff also proposes specification that the start time for the 50-year goal for basin restoration is the effective date of the original basin plan amendments, January 17th, 2020. Additionally, the Regional Board staff recommends a correction to the estimated costs to agriculture section pertaining to the cost estimate per year for the salt and nitrate control program surveillance and monitoring program. The correction revises the amount from the range of $70,000 to $130,000 to the range of $210,000 to $390,000 per year. The need for this correction was discovered during the revisions process. It was found to be due to a previous oversight in the transfer of numbers from the original staff report to the original basin plan amendments. The original staff report calculations and totals for this cost estimate are correct, and no changes to the calculations are being proposed. I would now like to pause for any questions on this matter.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I will continue to the next section of the presentation. The regional board staff also proposes a few minor late revisions to the basin plan amendments as well. These late revisions were recently posted on the regional board website and sent to interested listservs. The late revisions are shown in the following slides with double underlines and double strike-throughs to differentiate them from the original proposed revisions with single underlines and single strike-throughs. The first late revision is located in the Basin Plan Amendment Resolution in the Findings section, Item 3. It corrects the date of State Board approval of the Basin Plan amendments from October 16, 2020 to October 16, 2019. The second late revision is located in the Basin Plan amendments in the Conservative Salinity Permitting Approach section, footnote 4. The word narrative was removed as a descriptor of the MUN objective, which is a numeric range objective in the basin plans. The third late revision is in the Basin Plan amendments as well. It was brought to the regional board staff's attention this week and consists of the addition of site-specific values for the City of Roseville's Dry Creek and Pleasant Grove wastewater treatment plants to be used as delineation values for the conservative salinity permitting approach. These values were robustly developed as site-specific numeric interpretations to protect AGR beneficial uses for the wastewater treatment plants. Please see the revised language on the slide. The late revision adds these values near the end of footnote 5 of the conservative salinity permitting approach section of the Basin Plan amendments and includes a calendar year average effluent concentration of 900 microsiemens per centimeter to protect the AGR beneficial use for the City of Roseville, Dry Creek, and Pleasant Grove wastewater treatment plants. Additionally, the units were previously listed throughout the footnote 5 were changed from microohms per centimeter to microsiemens per centimeter, which are equal to each other, to be consistent with the units of other values listed in this section. Additionally, two proposed late revisions that were not detailed in the late revisions document are presented to be proposed here. The first late revision is that the regional board staff proposed changing footnote 3 in the Basin Plan Amendment Conservative Salinity Permitting Approach section on page 17 to read, for site-specific numeric groundwater values that were developed as a numeric interpretation of the Basin Plan's narrative objectives that protect the AGR beneficial use, the Dixon Wastewater Treatment Plant Facility, and continuing on. The second late revision is that the regional board staff proposed changing footnote 5 in the Basin Plan Amendment Conservative Salinity Permitting Approach section on page 19 to read, for site-specific numeric EC values that were developed as a numeric interpretation of the Basin Plan's narrative objectives that protect the AGR beneficial use for the City of Woodland Water Pollution Control Facility, and continued on. I will now pause here for any questions regarding the late revisions.
And Janelle or Jean, are you looking for any hands being raised?
Dr. Longley, there are several blue card commenters for this item.
So let's Jennifer, let's wait till we get to the blue card session, or if somebody wants to ask questions at that time.
That sounds great, Dr. Longley. Thank you.
I think the invitation was primarily to the board members.
No hands raised.
Board members know that they can ask a question at any time.
just giving you some space for that.
Thank you very much.
No problem. I'll continue to the next section. During the process of current revisions to the regional board, during the process of the current revisions, the regional board received a letter from the EPA on November 2nd, 2020, approving most of the surface water components of the original Basin Plan amendments. In this letter, EPA also disapproved 3 provisions as well. The 3 EPA disapproved provisions have been removed from the current proposed amendments. These disapproved provisions were discussed previously between EPA and the regional board and the subsequent removals are minor revisions that do not present any challenges to the current salt and nitrate control program implementation. The first revision is removal of the temporary authorization of constituents to be in the short-term range for secondary maximum contaminant levels for domestic drinking water in Title 22, Table 64449-B. Also removed was the allowance of exceedances of objectives due to elevated natural background concentrations for secondary maximum contaminant levels. And lastly, the variance program for salinity water quality standards was removed due to the disallowing of multi-discharger variances. This was addressed in the State Board directed revisions in the approving resolution due to prior comments received by State Board by the EPA before the State Board approval hearing. The first two deletions only apply to surface water provisions and are retained as groundwater provisions in the current proposed basin plan amendments. Here I would like to address the overarching comments Regional Board staff received during the public comment period for these proposed revisions. A public comment period was conducted from September 4th to October 19th, 2020. 4 sets of written comments were received from the Contra Costa Water District, Stantec Consulting Services, Inc., the Central Valley Salinity Coalition, and the Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. Regional Board staff wrote a response to comments document to formally address each of these comments. The Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability referenced a previous comment letter from March 2020 in their recent letter, so comments from the prior letter were addressed in the response to comments document as well. I will now discuss 4 significant comments from the comment period. The first comment is regarding the addition of site-specific values for certain dischargers to determine applicability for the conservative salinity permitting approach. One concern was that the inclusion of these values was out of the scope of the project. The other was that the values were not inclusive enough of other site-specific values that may be applicable. While not directed by State Board for this modification, the Regional Board proposes these revisions to clarify that the footnoted site-specific values qualify to be used as conservative salinity permitting approach delineation values because they were developed with robust studies as site-specific numeric interpretation of the basin plan for the specified dischargers. These site-specific values are not intended to be used as water quality objectives, only as protective threshold values. If any other applicable site-specific values are discovered for this provision before the adoption of these revisions, those values will be included, such as the previously mentioned values for the City of Roseville. Otherwise, future site-specific objectives will require basin plan adoption in order to be used for delineation. This modification does not preclude future site-specific water quality objective development. Comment 2 was a request to include information in the basin plan amendments about financial assistance eligibility for nitrate impacted water systems, including a list of proposed factors to be considered for determining financial support. The Regional Board appreciates the suggestion, but due to the specific nature of this list, the Regional Board will instead consider it to inform a potential future guidance document on nitrate impacted water systems rather than include it in the more general and regulatory language of the proposed basin plan amendments. For comment 3, there was concern that the nitrate exception term maximum of 35 years is unreasonable and excessive, and a request was made for a thorough and stringent review of nitrate exception terms, especially regarding evaluation of term limits being as short as practicable. The Regional Board will take all appropriate actions necessary to protect designated beneficial uses. This includes the basin plan amendments provision that nitrate exception terms will be publicly reviewed every 5 years, with careful consideration of time schedules being as short as practicable. The Regional Board may modify the exception term limits during this review as appropriate. Additionally, nitrate exceptions may be terminated if the approved terms are not being satisfactorily met. And comment 4, although not directed specifically at any of the new revised language, discussed concern that the salt control program creates a penalty for dischargers in areas of high salinity in groundwater, surface and groundwaters. The regional board is not proposing a penalty or a change to effluent limits. However, dischargers would need to continue salinity control efforts and participate in the region-wide prioritization and optimization study, which seeks long-term solutions for salinity impairments in the Central Valley. Salinity management is a region-wide effort that needs the participation of all affected dischargers to work towards restoration efforts together that will help everyone in the long term. I would now like to discuss the regional board staff recommendations and proposed next steps of this project. This slide shows our next steps and timeline. Today, the regional board will consider adopting these revisions to the Salt and Nitrate Control Program Basin Plan amendments. If these amendments are adopted today, we would anticipate a state board hearing to review the revised amendments early next year, followed by Office of Administrative Law and EPA reviews. At this time, I would like to ask the board to include the staff presentation into the record and adopt the resolution that approves the staff report and adopts these revisions and late revisions into the original Salt and Nitrate Control Program Basin Plan amendments into the water quality control plans for the Sacramento River Basin and San Joaquin River Basin and the Tulare Lake Basin. Thank you, Chair Longley and members of the board for your consideration of these revisions to the Basin Plan amendments. At this time, I would now like to open up the floor for any questions.
Any questions or comments by board members?
No, I think we've come a long way in this process. I think all of the amendments and suggestions that have come forth are beneficial, and I appreciate the staff's report, and I think we're moving forward in the right direction with this process.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
As I've said before, particularly back in January when we considered the Basin Plan amendments, this has been a long time getting here. It started back in 2006, actually, with the joint meeting on salinity between the state board and our regional board, January 30th to be exact. And Tam Dudek at that point was state board chair, and she directed that we start this program. It's been a stakeholder effort, and in the beginning, you know, it was hard to predict where it was going to take us. I think it's been successful, but as a stakeholder process, it has a lot. There ought to be a book written on it. I think there's a lot learned out of this. And there was a demonstration that these processes do work, even though they take a long time. You arrive at documents that are at policies that are much more applicable to the population being served, and they serve the stakeholders, not only the stakeholders, but all affected people. So I commend you for your hard work, and this thing will continue. We see 50 years out there. That 50 years is not right. It's going to continue to however long we have human activity in this valley. And it's interesting, and I've noted this before, that the people who started this process probably won't be living when the 50 years finishes. Either that or they'll be very, very, very old. So going to be picked up. It is being picked up by people like yourself and others to carry on. Any further comment by board members?
Yeah, Dr. Longley, I would like to comment along the lines that you made regarding the process and the stakeholder participation. It was phenomenal. I've not seen anything like it before. As I've mentioned before, everybody did not get out of this process what they wanted, but everybody got to participate and everybody got something. And I think the consensus building approach really led to a good basin plan. So I do commend the staff for what has happened, where we are, like I said, in the process. It is something to write a book about, as you said, because it was a long process, but in the end, I think beneficially it serves our region well.
You're absolutely right, Denise. It achieves the goals of protecting water quality, and that's what we're all about. Water quality, not only for drinking, that's a critical one, certainly addressed by the nitrate and to a lesser degree by the salinity provision, but also water quality insofar as being able to carry on farming operations. One of the initial reports out of UC Davis that was used, the economic study, pointed out that we were losing considerable farmland towards the buildup of salt in the soil. We know that crops have had to be substituted, more solid crops have had to be substituted in some instances, which affects sometimes the profitability of farming that land. So, as I said, it's a program, if we're going to have human habitation here that provides a good quality of life and provides an economic well-being for the people in this valley, this program has to continue to however long we have human habitation here. Any further comments? With that said, let's go to the blue cards. I have a card from Jonathan Nelson of the Community Water Center. Is Jonathan here or somebody from Community Water Center?
Yes. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Hear you fine.
All right,
Good
thanks.
morning, Jonathan.
It's still morning. I was about to say good afternoon. Jonathan Nelson, Policy Director with the Community Water Center. Want to just start by saying—
Excuse me 1 second. Did you take the oath?
I did.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
We just want to start by saying thank you to the staff. This has been a long process. We are overall supportive of adoption, and we're appreciative of the Water Board for working with us on a number of the comments and accepting a number of our recommendations. And we want to reiterate one key point for us, that the 35-year exceptions should be rare and avoided as much as possible rather than the norm. And we do expect the regional board to really scrutinize any requests to utilize that 35-year exceptions because of what it means for communities. You know, this is asking another couple generations for their families, their communities, to deal with this reality. So that's important. Also want to spend just a moment talking about implementation of a key part of this Basin Plan Amendment, which is early action plans. You know, from the beginning, we had real concerns about whether communities would actually be meaningfully consulted as part of early action plan development, which is, you know, needs to be happening right now. And as we know, early action plans are supposed to be designed to meet community drinking water needs. But to do so, early action plans must be shaped by the communities that are most impacted by nitrates. And that is, as we understand and are seeing so far, not happening. And we only have until early March. So we're running out of time. We are hearing from some management zones who say they expect to only have, you know, a week or so for public comment on their early action plans. One thing to flag for you all, CWC in partnership with Leadership Council on Clean Water Action has commissioned a report developed by a technical consulting firm that identifies the kinds of outreach and engagement activities we believe needs to occur, as well as the kind of solutions that we think need to be seen in early action plans. And we will be sharing that with you all shortly. And lastly, you know, we will do what we can do to participate in management zones processes. We're committed to this, but we cannot take on the critical outreach role on behalf of management zones. We just don't have the capacity or the reach. Management zones could choose to contract with a technical assistance provider that does have meaningful community engagement expertise. We think that could be a difference maker. But again, time is running out. We only have till early March. So we urge the regional water board, please pay careful attention to what's happening right now, and please engage early and find creative ways to make sure that community engagement that needs to happen does happen before you get these early action plans in March in a way that may be fatally flawed and not reflective of community needs. So with that, thank you so much.
I have a comment and then a question for staff. insofar as the groundwater, I agree with you. It's important that programs be implemented that are very timely. We need to have safe drinking water available as soon as possible. One of the things that has bothered me for many years is the fact that oftentimes small communities out there are working by themselves, and they really don't have the financial management or technical capability of being able to carry out these kinds of activities. Whereas if they became part of a larger organization that serviced all of those communities, you could, by this simple fact that you have scale, you could be more efficient at providing services to the customers. I've thought that for years. I've mentioned that in numerous forums, and certainly it's something I think that would be beneficial if it came about. It's the kind of process that's practiced in the Midwest in numerous states where they have rural water systems. It's successful elsewhere. I think we need to take a page out of the book of success that is experienced elsewhere. On the bit of providing the services of informing the communities of the program, I'd like to ask staff where we are on that, what our role is. And I've heard the discussion of using outside providers to do that in the past. I'd like to know if we are considering that, and if so, where we are on that.
So I think I can kind of take it in summary. The requirement in the Basin Plan amendments is that by March 8th, the management zones and the forming management zones provide the regional board with their early action plan, what they're going to be doing to provide replacement drinking water. And the regional board then has 60 days to kind of evaluate that and determine whether it's a go or no go for the early action plans. And even if the board doesn't act, those early action plans have to be implemented. I think that in those early action plans under the Basin Plan Amendment have to take local considerations into account. So Jonathan's absolutely right. They're running out of time to have that local engagement, but I would kind of flag the issue that between replacement water, between bottled water, between service kiosks, and the ultimate infrastructure solutions that those communities need, there is going to be, and there has to be under our program, a tremendous amount of community engagement that is part of that process. So the early action plan is meant to be kind of a triage, a Band-Aid, an emergency action that the dischargers are going to provide an interim drinking water solution. But the idea is that the public participation does not end there at all. It goes on because there's really a very, very different dynamic between, hey, how would you like your bottled water delivered to your house versus what system do you want to be a part of? How does your community want to manage their water? Do you want to combine with another system? What are the other systems' opinions? What is the time frame? What are the rates that we're going to be doing? What are the rate support that we're going to be doing? What are the infrastructure needs? Those conversations are incredibly detailed. So to a certain extent, you know, the initial early action plans certainly have to reflect the community interest in what they want and how they expect their interim solutions to be delivered. But really, we're talking about a public engagement process that is in part influenced by what the State Board's Office of Public Participation has provided as general guidance, what the State Board would accept as a reasonable kind of proposal that will, in some instances, absolutely rely on technical providers to help out with that type of engagement as we go forward and kind of formulate long-term solutions for these communities. So again, I you know, at the emergency level, there's probably not going to be the level of public engagement that we would like because there's just simply not enough time. But that's something that the board balanced between providing a drinking water solution that we allowed a consensus process to develop. We allowed full engagement. That will take years. That will take an exceptional amount of time, even through the consultant presentation that Community Water Center has engaged with. There's a significant investment needed within a first year to kind of get that engagement at the community level, versus getting some drinking water out there as soon as possible to meet the needs of the community, and then start talking and saying, is this working for you? Do we need something else? What's going to be the long-term solution? What's the staging of this? How does your community plan to develop in the future? How are your needs going to change with the needs of the valley? So that, I think, is the big picture. It's going to be a rough Band-Aid approach to kind of cover the ground between when the regional board imposes this program, when the early action plans start, and ultimately after the management zone implementation plans are submitted to the board, and they have a subsequent public engagement process. And then as those unfold over up to 35 years, what is the solution going to be? That's really the big picture that we're looking at here. So totally appreciate Jonathan's concerns. It's something that we've been echoing to the management zone proponents as this process has unfolded. It's something that the regional board places a lot of stock in and a lot of value in. And we've sent the warning out as well, that if you submit an early action plan that does not reflect the needs of the community, you're going to have some problems getting that approved, or at a minimum, maybe you go back to the drawing board to talk about those issues. So that's what we put out there. And Jonathan, I appreciate your concerns here. We're trying to take them to heart as we develop this program.
So as I understand, 8 March is the date that the drop dead date that their report has to be in, the management zone reports have to be in. Is that correct?
The early action plans and essentially the roster of who's going to be the seed of the management zones. And then there's about 6 months after that to develop the plans, not the early action plans. Early action plans, they're starting to get replacement water out there very quickly after that. But the big plans, how are the permits going to be modified? Who's going to be working to reduce their nitrate loads first? That is going to be due 6 months after that March deadline. And then we're going to be in a process of working through how we're going to approve them, what the vehicle is going to be, revising waste discharge requirements. And that's really where the red team that was awarded the Superior Accomplishment Award earlier, that's what they've been focusing on, setting the groundwork for accomplishing that as we get the plans in.
So they're in March. April would be too soon. In the June meeting, do you think next year, do you think that we would have a presentation on where we are with this process?
I think absolutely. I mean, we're going to be checking in fairly regularly with the board. I think we're clearing our calendars to take a look within that 60-day window at these early action plans, and we'll have some report back to you if it's because that is just ending right around that kind of window. We may not have the full comprehensive write-up about that, but absolutely, I'd like to report back to the board about how the process is going, where we've received the reports from, and certainly, the state board's asking for that too. The state board is asking how these management zones are interacting with SGMA, how they're interacting with the SAFER program, and so as we take this amendment package forward, we're staying fully engaged in both of those processes too.
Jonathan, I don't think that fully satisfies you, but that's where we are.
Can I share just a brief, maybe reflection
Sure.
here? Thank you for that opportunity. And what I would say is I think that community engagement is important, of course, at every stage. And like the executive officer shared, we'll continue after. So we definitely have full agreement on that. I think the challenge is that, our farmers are world-class farmers. They are not experts in designing emergency community drinking water solutions. And so what we fear is that it's easy to sort of default to certain kinds of solutions, and this sort of early action plan context, such as kiosks. I think our concern is that these plans are not going to be reflective of community needs and desires unless we sort of make sure that communities shape the plans. The good news is that there's real expertise in California about how to do that. We have technical assistance providers whose job it is both to help engage with communities and have expertise around technical solutions. So I think the question for us is management zones need to really utilize that expertise, but they're running out of time to do it. And that if we get early action plans that are submitted to the Regional Water Board, it's encouraging to hear, of course, and Patrick has, I think, been clear with us, and we appreciate that there will be real scrutiny of these plans, but it'd be great if the early action plans could get to the Regional Water Board in a manner that already is shaped by community input, so that any emergency solutions actually meet community needs.
And I think it's important that we continue this dialogue. And I invite you back every board meeting we have. We have a.
He means it. I guarantee you, he means it.
Dr. Longley?
Yes.
I have a couple of comments.
Just 1 second, Denise.
Sure.
To finish my comment, we have a public participation item on every board meeting. You get at least 3 minutes. I would appreciate you coming back and letting the board know how effective or ineffective this program is as time goes on. So
I appreciate that. And we, the executive officer, the doors have been open for us. The communication
right.
Is something we want to continue. It's just, we're sort of moving, right? This is all fresh. We're moving into this new phase. So we'll continue to be committed to sharing this out. And I would just ask, let's lean in and be creative and sort of engage now rather than sort of wait till after this key March 8th deadline and then be in a situation that, we'd prefer not to be in.
Yeah. And I just add on my comment. I think among other things, we have to consider how we can better perform these services by developing scale for these communities, putting communities together for the same provider, that sort of thing. And that's what's happened elsewhere successfully. Well, not only there, it's happened in New Mexico successfully. So with that said, thank you very much. And Denise, I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that, well, first of all, I do appreciate Jonathan and the EJ groups. I've said it a number of times, the role you play in representing disadvantaged communities. I think at this time where we are, the time of March 8th is approaching. And I think it was something that was said earlier, the management zones could actually be the ones that help contract for the help, along with the assistance of the Public Participation Office. So I'm really thinking that we need to consider that. One thing that we're dealing with right now during this pandemic, we're on a Zoom call. Many people in disadvantaged communities, they have phones. We have a lot of community leaders. We need to have the public participation, the management zone people. When you're doing your GSA meetings, or when you're doing everybody, the management zones, you're trying to get situated, plug into the community. Stop saying you're not able to reach them, because that's not going to be good enough for me when I hear it come back and you've not reached out. You cannot come up with a plan that's not going to serve the people that are impacted, and they've not had a voice at the table. So we have to figure out a way. And I'm saying Zoom is what we're using right now, and we're reaching more people than ever before. We're not on the roads traveling. We're sitting in a space. Family members can join in the conversation. Get people involved to where they can participate and you can hear their voice, and make sure there's someone there to translate. That's a dire need right now, as we're talking about early action plans. And people are going to have to dance to the beat of somebody else's drum on a program that doesn't really represent or serve to benefit them. So I think we still have an opportunity. March 8th is not too far away, But if we take our time and look at how we can, public participation should really have the lead on this, how we can zoom in with Community Water Center and those agencies that are working in these communities to get these Zoom meetings set up where people can participate. It's happening right now, and we will be left on the short end of the stick if this does not happen. This process has taken too long. We've gone too far. We've had the EJ groups put in a lot of time, and communities, but we don't want to let this plan go forth, these management zones, these early action plans, without participation from the people that are going to be impacted. And I'm looking forward to see something happen along those lines. Thank you.
Denise, you couldn't have said it better. I thank you very much.
I'll certainly add that you know, we have been having those conversations, and we have been marrying up management zones, playing matchmaker with OPP, management zones, and the technical assistance providers, folks like self-help, other organizations that are used to doing this type of work. And I, you know, I find it interesting when a management zone starts a conversation with a group like self-help. I think they have one concept of how they would be doing public outreach to kind of get the support that they need for their programs. And very quickly it becomes apparent, and I think, you know, to Jonathan's point, very quickly it becomes apparent that there's a whole another world of expertise that entities like self-help and other technical assistance providers have. And to their credit, I believe the management zones have been quick to recognize that, wow, you know, we do know things like, you know, soil science. We do know things like irrigation efficiency, nitrate efficiency use. But because this is a whole other world, we need to figure out a way to contract out to get this type of work done. I think some of that work is being done. I know some of that work is being done right now to help shape what the management zones are going to be proposing in their early action plans. That is reflective of what the community needs are, using some templates that, you know, have been provided in the past through work that has been done by State Board with the involvement of the Office of Public Participation, with the involvement of the Office of Enforcement, and with community engagement on these particular matters. I think we're learning from lessons both gained within Region 5. There's a lot of actual drinking water being provided right now by the State Board and other folks in Region 5 and in Region 2, where they've had several drinking water programs with varying degrees of success. Learn from those and using that information to understand and adapt to community needs as they develop these early action plans. So, you know, it's a complicated process, and, you know, the regional board, same token, I think, Denise, we hear you loud and clear. We're not experts in public engagement too, and I think we have to accept that and reach out ourselves to folks that have done this professionally. I think, you know, the addition of Adriana Renteria in the Office of Public Participation, somebody who worked within those communities and within those advocacy groups, has really been helpful at advancing that type of conversation and helping get us to the point where we understand what our limitations are and how it would be more effective to engage with those communities as we develop solutions. But again, my comment is that this is kind of one stage. It's probably going to be imperfect. Just you know, throwing it out there, it is going to be imperfect through this first level of community engagement. But we expect refinement and additional investment in these types of engagement efforts as we move forward in the program, because this is not something that's going to be dealt with in a year or 5 years or 10 years. This is a long-term commitment to the well-being of these communities. So that's I definitely hear you loud and clear, both Board Member Kadara and Jonathan.
Thank you very much. Any further comment by board members? Thank you. We'll go to the next card from Paul Bedore, consultant for the City of Roseville.
Good morning. My name is Paul Bedore, and I had put in a virtual blue card in the event that we needed to answer any questions with regards to the requests we put in this week for information submitted on behalf of the City of Roseville. And I'm just thankful that Ms. Fuller you know, took that on right away and provided us the feedback we needed, and just made us aware of the opportunity to comment if we needed to. And we don't have any other comments at this time.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions from board members? Hearing none, thank you. We'll go on to the next blue card. Catelyn Kalua, I hope I pronounced that right, Catelyn.
It's Kalua, thank you.
Kalua, thank you.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No, no worries. I teleprompter is
California
often it's
Coastkeeper
koala,
event.
so
Yeah. Have you taken the oath, by the way?
yes, I have.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
All right, good morning, Chair Longley, members of the board. My name is Caitlin Kalua. I'm the policy manager for the California Coastkeeper Alliance, which represents local waterkeepers organizations throughout the state, primarily committed to protecting and improving water quality, as I said, throughout the state. And overall, we're supportive of adoption today. I do echo and support the comments provided by Community Water Center earlier this morning with slight spin in that. Just would like to reiterate that yes, compliance schedules should be as short as practicable as described by staff and an earlier comment, and that the use of the 35-year compliance schedule really should be used only after careful review and certainly not used as the norm, and that we further encourage the use of enforceable interim milestones that should be used as a tool to ensure compliance with the overarching goals of this program. And as a second reiterating point, that no solution to our drinking water problems can be achieved essentially by allowing for continued indefinite degradation of our source waters and our groundwater aquifers. I mean, certainly in the Central Valley. And again, really appreciate this morning's discussion that, of course, these early action plans, they must be designed to meet community drinking water needs, and they must be informed by those most impacted by nitrate pollution. And recognizing, again, this morning's discussion that certainly the State Water Board is evolving in its public participation outreach. I know currently there's a huge expansion at the State Water Board level in expanding the Office of Public Participation, but certainly caution against the use of these of templates, you know, knowing that there have, it's no size fits all, and that, as was mentioned by board member Cadera, that there are tools to reach out to these communities to contract for this outreach, and you know, appreciate that this is an adaptive process and that community needs may change over time, but there's no reason not to do it right, you know, correctly now. So with that, thank you and appreciate this morning's dialogue, and again, support today's adoption.
Thank you. Any board member questions or comments for Catalin? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll go on to the next card. Jennifer Clary.
Good morning, everyone. I haven't been sworn in yet. Did I miss a phone call?
Do you swear the comments you'll make are the truth? If so, answer I do.
I do.
I didn't ask you to raise your right hand. I guess if you could
Okay,
raise your right
I
hand.
do. I even turned off my virtual background so you could see my right hand.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Anyway,
Thank you, Jennifer. Go ahead.
Thanks, Carl. So thank you. I want to thank the board members for having this item today and for allowing us time to speak. And I also want to thank staff for being so open and transparent. We've had meetings with them, a lot of good discussions. And generally we're supportive of the BPA. You know, of course, we're not happy with the 35 years, but it was better than the open-ended deadline we had before. So as a halfway point, a concession, we're supportive. I do want to reinforce what my colleagues have said about the need for board oversight. You have a clear responsibility, and I really appreciated hearing both you and board member Cadera stating just what your oversight was going to look like. And when we're talking about meaningful consultation, one of the bad lessons we're looking at is the State Water Board's Tulare drinking water settlement, where they're relying exclusively on drinking water kiosks that went in about between 8 months and a year and a half late. I'm not quite sure if they're all in yet. Debbie's on maternity leave, so I wasn't able to check with her. So if we're looking, if plans come in on March 8th that say we're going to give you kiosks now and then come in later and think about drinking water, about bottled water or point of use as we do more outreach and engagement, that's not an appropriate plan. Because one thing that the report that Jonathan referenced has told us is that there's a significant population of people who can't access kiosks. We're not able to measure how many people can't travel to the kiosks. So even not thinking about travel difficulties, and we know that's an issue because there's a cost involved. You have people who just can't lift a 5-gallon bottle of water, and so they can't access the kiosk. And I say that as a little old lady who can't lift a 5-gallon bottle of water. So just saying, we really need to be sure. That's why we really want to have consultation, so that we know that we have solutions, that an interim solution is really going to work for those people who are impacted. And that's about all I have to say. I appreciate your commitment to outreach and engagement, and just hope we can find a way to get that implemented as part of the early action plan. And thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jennifer, for your comments. I couldn't agree. I agree with you entirely on the problem. I started to say I couldn't agree with you more on the comment you made about kiosks. Kiosks can serve an important role. They're certainly good at schools, but there has to be water delivery for a certain segment of the population. They don't have the ability to use kiosks. And I think we need to set a real high bar that for groups that want to explain why they can only provide a kiosk. With that said, we shouldn't be having to provide kiosks or delivered water. We need to find ways to move quickly to providing people with water at the tap that's safe.
And I'm going to chime in right here, right now. I've said it before. I don't think any household who bought a home or rented a home and then be told they have to go someplace else to get water is appropriate. Not in any disadvantaged community that's been impacted, or any other community. And if it wouldn't be allowed in any other community, it should not be allowed in a disadvantaged community. That is not what's appropriate. If the impact is there and there's no fault of their own, why are they having to be inconvenienced under any circumstance for drinking water that they paid for in their rental or owner-occupied unit? We have to figure out a better way. I spoke at the hearing before the state board, and I expressed that concern. And the fact that we're still even considering, and I know we're looking at all options, but people that are impacted should not be burdened any further. There should be a more appropriate way of addressing the concerns, and I'm very adamant about that. My position on it has not changed one bit.
Thank you, Denise. It couldn't be stated better. We have to work towards people having safe water at the tap, and I see a lot of movement at the state board in that direction. I don't see the kind of action that gets us there immediately, and immediately 2, 3, 4 years. And my concern is 10 years from now, we'll be having this same dialogue. So, any further comments? There are not, I don't have any, I don't see any more cards. Are there any more cards, Janelle?
Yes, the next blue card is for Debbie Webster of the Central Valley Clean Water Association.
Debbie, go ahead. And you've taken the oath, is that correct?
I did, thank you. Well, and thank you, Chair Longley and board members. I appreciate this coming up. And I just also want to thank, actually a couple of thank yous. Again, thank you for this stakeholder process. It has been a long, intense process. I've been part of most, if not all of it. And I do think that we are moving towards ways that we really can address these issues. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you also for allowing the kind of staff time that this is taking, because it does as you went through and talked about with rewards, and then also just knowing with the meetings is that really that engagement has been incredibly valuable and will be so instrumental in making this process and this program successful. So thank you for that. Just wanted to touch on two things. First of all, just to let you know, CVWQC supports the late and the late revisions, specifically as they relate to some of the site-specific values developed by our POTWs. We recognize that CV SALT has an implementation program for SALT that is developed to basically provide a way of interpreting narratives interpreting narratives and the MUN designation in this first phase. So understand why these values are being put in the basin plan. We do know that as we move forward for interpretations, that being able to provide site-specific interpretations for narratives outside of basin plan amendments are going to be key in really being flexible because of the time and energy and cost of actually making some of the basin plan amendments. So we look forward in this next phase to addressing those concerns. And then the second thing is just, it was brought up that the EPA comments and the amendments were probably just going to be easy revisions. There are some areas, especially as they relate to secondary MCLs, that CVWQC has been very concerned about, and maybe they are just administrative, but they are some areas that we just want to make sure that yes, the final changes that go into the basin plan are reflective of the disallowances, what's actually put in the basin plan reflects that without taking away some of the previous language that was in there. So. Your staff, like I said, your staff's been great to work with, and working with Patrick on that, it's just an area that we would really like to see before these just are administratively made. So with that, I appreciate the comments, and we're working with your staff in getting our POTW community ready to go with the SALT program early next year. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Debbie? Thank you, Debbie. We'll move then. Janelle, was that the end of the cards?
We have one more, and Natalie Escobedo Garcia, representing the Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability.
Okay, Natalie, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Have you taken the oath?
No. I mean, I was on the call the entire time. So.
Okay. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear the comments you are about to make are the truth? If so, answer I do.
I do.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on the draft basin plan amendments. We support the adoption of the revisions and thank regional board staff for its efforts to timely comply with the direction from the state board in the State Board Resolution 2019-0057. In our written comments, we expressed disappointment that the regional board has not yet provided guidance to dischargers and stakeholders regarding when water systems impacted by nitrate pollution are eligible for short and long-term drinking water solutions. We have raised the issue during many discussions over the last several years and proposed several factors that we think could be used to help determine eligibility for assistance, as well as the amount of any subsidy needed to help treat or otherwise address nitrate contamination. In the response to comments, regional board staff noted that these factors would be included in a guidance document than in the basin plan. We do not disagree with this position, but we urge staff to promptly move forward with guidance on this point. Additionally, though we acknowledge the challenges of engaging impacted residents during the COVID-19 pandemic, we are concerned that implementation of CV SALT has not yet involved a concerted effort to notify impacted residents about the program in general or the early action plan development process in particular. There are only a few months between now and when the early action plans need to be submitted to the regional board on March 8th. We ask that the management zones and regional board ensures that effective outreach to impacted communities begins immediately so that the EAPs are informed by by input from residents who know the most about conditions in their communities and about what drinking water solutions will be effective. This program will only be successful if early action plans ensure access to drinking water for impacted residents. And our position is that the EAPs will not be effective if policy decisions are not made without meaningfully engaging those who are most impacted. Finally, we again note that the 35-year exemption to the requirement to meet the water quality objective for nitrate in groundwater should be rare and only used after a thorough and critical review of whether a shorter timeline is practicable for each discharger or category of dischargers. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide comments.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to ask staff to elucidate a bit on what they expect as next action for it was asked, I know, by letter on October 19, 2020 from Community Water Center Leadership Council, Clean Water Action, American Rivers, California Coast Keepers, that those provisions on the kinds of services to be provided and so forth, the qualifications that are needed and so forth, be provided in the basin plans. And instead it stated that that's going to be an alternative document. So I appreciate if I could get some clarification from staff on the alternative document.
So essentially, when we're talking about that provision, we're talking about small systems that have already been impacted by nitrate contamination that have made infrastructure investments, drilling new wells, and are essentially have spent money to deal with a nitrate contamination problem that was not of their making. This was an issue that was raised actually extensively in front of the state board, and the state board kind of wrestled with that, and that was primarily their direction. This isn't something that needs to be in the basin plan. Rather, this is something that should be negotiated and should be discussed openly between Division of Financial Assistance at the state board level, between the SAFER program as it outlays its funds and tries to address not just existing ongoing contamination issues, but also arsenic, 1,2,3-TCP, and other water supply issues there. So we're really queuing off of what the state board's directives were. It'd be tough to kind of integrate that into the basin plan at this juncture, but our kind of nod to the fact that this is an important consideration is the commitment to say we're going to keep working on this, we're going to keep engaging, and we're going to figure this out in collaboration with state board and their funding mechanisms and the communities that are affected.
Thank you very much. And you mentioned other contaminants. We've been focused on nitrates, and quite frankly, from a treatment standpoint, the nitrate is one of the easier ones. Arsenic affects a lot of those small communities out there, and it really points to the difficulties that I think we face in the future providing safe drinking water supplies to these communities. There really needs to be some movement made for alternative water supplies, preferably surface water supplies, and pull a number of communities together, small communities together in that action to be able to get viable systems that can be financially affordable by the folks using that water. This is going to take some very strong actions by not only this board, but by the state board to move us in that direction so that these folks can have the water supplies they deserve. Thank you very much. Any further comment by board members?
I see there's a hand raised for Caitlin Kalua.
Caitlin, could you?
Hi, yes, very briefly, I apologize. I did make a mistake and I want to correct the record in that I do stand by my comment, but I did not take the oath into this format. And I do want to correct, that if possible.
Okay, well, this is post comment, but raise your hand where the comments that you made the truth, and if so, answer I do.
I do, and I do stand by the accuracy of my previous comment.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the correction. Any further comments? Seeing none, we move now to closing statement by staff.
I would just say that I absolutely respect the opinions of the folks who have come forward today to express their concerns about the implementation of this program. The program itself and the amendments that are before the board today would allow us to continue to make progress in all of the areas in which the commenters are expressing concerns. So I do recommend adoption of this agenda item, moving it forward to state board consideration. I would also note that we are currently working on the notice to comply, as we discussed in previous board meetings, for salinity, which will be mailed out early January. So a lot of these program pieces are currently moving forward. And what we're doing here today is to keep the ball rolling, make the changes that the state board asked us to make, and frankly that we think are good additions to the program, refine the program, and really sketch out the endpoints in a little sharper detail. So with that, I wholeheartedly recommend adoption of the proposed basin plan amendments, and we absolutely will keep not just the comments of the interested persons, but also of yourself, of board member Kadara, and other board members as we move forward with the implementation.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Yeah, we've got to find better ways to do this. The old way doesn't work. I'll close the hearing at this point and ask the board for deliberation on this issue, and I'll accept the motion to adopt in a second, not only the resolution, but the late revisions. Thank you. What's your pleasure?
Yeah, I guess I really appreciate that discussion, and especially the incorporation and of the stakeholders that raised their hands and submitted blue cards. Seems like there's been a lot of interaction, which that's encouraging to hear about. There wasn't any real opposition presented. And at the same time, the board member Kadara brought up some very passionate points about having water available. If there's a kiosk situation, the kiosk should really be on their front porch, not require driving, or better yet, Carl, as you pointed out, they should be able to get tap water of drinking water quality. So with that, I just appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I know it's been a long road, and I would move to adopt the revisions to the basin plan amendments as discussed today.
And does that include the revisions and late revisions?
Yes, including late revisions.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Marcus moved and Denise has seconded. Any further discussion?
I would just ask Adam to make absolutely clear the slate of the late revisions that are coming in.
Yeah, well, they're still going on.
Dr. Longley, this is Carmen. I want to thank board member Kadara for the comments that she made. These are things that we think about, but when they're stated in the way that she did it, they really add a lot. And, sometimes to be forewarned is to be forearmed. So I think that people that are going to participate in this know that the board is setting high standards and that we're going to be looking for engagement, and not just sincere efforts, but results too. So whether that means engaging a third party, as was suggested, because we can't be good at all things just on our own, but that was important. And then one of the first commenters, named Jonathan, said something that really struck me in a different way, because when we talk about 35 years, 50 years, things like that, he said that 35 years is really 2 generations. And when you think about it that way, it's a long, long time. And so I don't know that, how many of us will be here when these things come up, but I hope that any exceptions, especially long exceptions, really, really weigh heavily on us when we make those decisions, because they're right, shouldn't be taken lightly. So I intend to support, to vote affirmatively on this motion, but you know, we will be looking at this critically. It's a long program, a heavy program, and it deserves to be given the attention that it was, you know, formed with. So that's all I have.
Denise, I have a question for you. How long ago was it that we were involved in those meetings in Visalia?
The Tulare Lake Oversight Committee Basin. Yes, that was 2013, 2014.
Okay, and so it was before that that there was a lot of discussion taking place that led up to that. That discussion probably started around in 2007, 2008. That's 13 years ago, 12, 13 years ago. And I really have seen very little movement in that time. I think these basin plan amendments and so forth represent, there has been some momentum, but it's not like I was hoping for back 12, 13 years ago.
A document that sits on the shelf?
Yep.
Yeah, well, I would just like to comment that we participated in the Water Quality Coordinating Committee session back in October 27th and 28th. And on the 28th, there was a discussion on racial equity. And that's the discussion today's discussion across the country, racial equity. And it's imperative that as we move forward with this, if we're going to do it, we want to do it to where it addresses the concerns for everybody, not just a few. And I'll just backtrack a minute. When we had the discussion on racial equity with the WQCC, I gave the comment about privilege over right. And those that are privileged think about themselves. Those that look on what is right, look on the needs of others. If we're going to move forward in today's society and how we're addressing issues, we have to look on the side of what's right and not what's just for us. Because when you do that, somebody is being left out, which is why I was passionate about speaking about this water situation. How many of you would want to have to leave your house to go get water from someplace where you paid for it to come out of your tap? It's wrong to expect it of anybody else if you're not willing to do it yourself. And I don't want to belabor the point, but I'm talking about racial equity. And we would not want to impose on anybody else what we wouldn't want to have to deal with ourselves. So that's how, as a board member, I see this situation, and I am supportive of it, of the amendments and the motion as is brought forth, but I will always look at it on those two instances, because if we want to address equality, we have to look at what is right. So thank you for allowing me to give those comments, Dr. Longley, and I support the motion.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? Then please call the roll.
Board Member Bradford,
Yes.
Board Member Brar,
Yes.
Board Member Kadara,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ramirez,
Yes.
Chair Longley.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, folks. We appreciate all of your comments. This is something that is a critical issue in this region and throughout California and elsewhere. It's important we find ways to make it happen as quickly as possible. Thank you. With that said, we have finished with the calendar business today, except for a closed session. And the best way to do this, if I recall, last time we signed back in, or did we not? I forget.
Yeah, Dr. Longley, you will have been provided a link and an appointment for a separate Zoom meeting that is not open to the public for the executive session. The Office Chief Counsel attorneys will announce that the matters to be discussed in closed session, then we will adjourn for a few minutes and reconvene on a separate Zoom account to convene the closed session.
Very good.
Okay,
we'll
Patrick,
then-
send me the Zoom. I don't know if I received it.
Okay.
I think it's the second one, but yeah, please send it out.
I'll certainly resend it. I do want to, take this moment since we're convening into closed session, and we won't be back in open session except to gavel the meeting virtually closed. I want to take this opportunity to extend my gratitude to a lot of people who have been pitching in to help out since we lost our executive assistant as the pandemic shifted us into work from home. That includes Kelly Garver, that includes Janelle, who has been duly fulfilling a lot of the functions, including taking minutes. This in addition to a lot of the work that she's been doing with the NPDS unit and on her regular job. Christine has also been helping out. She's been processing her travel claims and doing other stuff. These are all folks who have other jobs, and they've been pitching in to really help out and make sure that these board meetings go as smoothly as possible, even though we don't have an executive assistant right now. We're in the final stages of getting some interviews together and getting somebody hired on. So by next board meeting, we will have a formal executive assistant. But I really want to extend my thanks to the folks who have been making it happen behind the scenes and getting you the information that you need ahead of time, including kind of sending out some USB sticks this last go around just to make sure that connectivity issues didn't cause any concern. So my thanks to that. And with that, I will turn over to the Office of Chief Counsel for reading the matters that will be discussed in closed session, and I'll resend that Zoom link to all the board members.
Appreciate that before it goes over to Chief Counsel. I would like to say that on this end, the transition to the folks you just mentioned seemed almost seamless. I appreciate the services they've rendered greatly, and it has kept the train going, so to speak. Thank you very much, all.
So for closed session, we have 3 items to discuss. We'll be discussing item A, which is the Malaga cases, item F, which is the Sandridge Partners case, and item G, which is the Valley Water case.
Okay, and how much time do we need, Patrick, to switch over? 10 minutes, 30 minutes? What do you recommend?
Just a few minutes should be good.
Okay.
I'll send the Zoom link out, and we will be reconvening over there. I think Bob's waiting over there already for us, just to make sure that we don't have any IT issues.
Okay, let's start trying to sign in about 5 minutes, and we'll start when we get everybody on board.
All right, and I'm sending that right now.
Thank you.
Bob does have that ready to go for you.
Okay. All right.
So we'll keep this live until you come back and formally close this.
Okay, I'll come back, sign back in and close out.
So Patrick, if you're on, I don't need to be on. I think he's just going to sign in really quick and sign us out.
And gavel, yeah.
Gavel the meeting closed. I still think they haven't quite perfected what regulations apply, but I think the best practice is to come back into this meeting and gavel it closed.
We need
I found a gavel in the room in there. You want me to go get it?
Okay.
It has to be an e-gavel.
Oi, don't even give them idea.
Do we
I'm
know?
still the note taker. That's amazing. It remembers.
I was going to ask, do we know who note?
I should change my name now. I'm not taking any more notes on this one. Oh, I don't know how to do that. Let's see.
I can do it. Well, I'm anxious to see the YouTube recording. I was listening to the audio and it sounded so much better.
Yeah, no, I checked in just for a minute. It's really good.
I think the peak we saw was 67 on there.
Not too bad.
That would have taken a week to get that number from the Cali PA system, the Google Analytics. Bob and I were talking, we came into the office to do this. I think we could have done it remotely. Our challenge is a timer.
Yeah, we were glad to see that Janelle didn't have to be here for the for on-site, so that was good.
Yeah.
I see all the usual suspects. Excuse me for taking so long to find the link. I'll just formally close the I guess I need to say that the board met in executive session and discussed issues pertaining to litigation that the board is engaged in. And at this point, since there is no further business for this board today, the 572nd board meeting of the California Regional Water Quality Control Board, Central Valley Region is hereby adjourned.
All right, until February 18th and 19th is when the next board meeting is. So thank you so much.
February 18th and 19th, and Merry Christmas and great New Year for everybody.
Take care, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Olney. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.